Welcome back to Beyond Religion, X 2 by 2 Stories of Deconstruction, where we talk with people who have left the 2 by 2 church and whose beliefs have moved sometimes beyond Christianity, sometimes not. In the case of my guest today, they are still a believer and they can explain what that looks like for them. My guest today is Tara Sauvage. Thanks for being here, Tara.
Oh, hi. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed watching your podcast over the past several months. And I like the way you are with the clients or whatever you call them, the other people you're interviewing.
Yeah, the interviewees.
Yeah, you're nice and calm, and I like the way you talk to people. So I thought it would be interesting to go on your podcast because my story. I'm not on here to talk about like, oh, I'm now an atheist and this and that. The reason I wanted to talk to you was not really to talk about. Well, it's to talk about religion because religion's an important part of the story, but it's also to talk about one thing I've realized is that how you raise your kids affects how people are as an adult and it affects their whole adult life. And I'm like way into my middle age now. I've been married over 20 years. I have a 21-year-old daughter, and I still suffer from like some of the stuff I that came from the indoctrination as a kid. Severe anxiety, a fear of not being good enough and that type of thing. So I kind of wanted to talk about that just to see maybe it might be helpful to someone else. And also, really, if people are like still in the religion or they have young kids, just no matter what religion you're in, not to teach your kids from a fear-based religion because I'm like, I didn't raise my daughter in the fear like I was raised. So she doesn't suffer from that kind of fear. Like, oh my God, if I do this wrong, I'm going to go to hell, that kind of fear.
Right.
What do they call that? What do they call
Like
that?
scrupulosity.
Yeah. Like I had
Yeah.
that as a kid, but no one knew what it was called back in the day. Right.
Yeah.
So that's part of the reason I decided to go to talk to you. I thought it would be interesting to cover those topics.
I really appreciate that, and the intention for this project, although maybe it always was leaning a little bit toward like the non-believer, but it was never really intended to be that. I think it was intended for anybody who is deconstructed in any way from the 2 by 2 church, and that looks like a lot of different ways, and I look forward to hearing what that looks like for you. I like to start by just asking people what their beliefs look like right now, and what does that look like?
I would say I believe in God. I'm not a joiner, so like I'm paranoid. I mean, I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm like paranoid to join a new church, and I've been like that for 20 years because, like, so I work full time for my whole life, and I've
Mhm.
had a couple I don't like to have a boss. I don't like to be told what to do. I don't like to be told what to wear. I don't like to be told how to live my life. And part of that comes from being told what to wear, how to do your hair, and all that kind of stuff growing up in the two by
Yeah.
two church. So as an adult, my husband and I, when I first got married, we didn't join a church for many years because I was just like not into religion after leaving the two by two church. But he plays bass guitar for a Presbyterian church. So I'm not Presbyterian, but I go like once a month to support him. And that's kind of where it is. And, so I would say I lean towards Christianity, but I'm not like religious. Like I
Hmm.
would never tell someone, you're going to go to hell because you don't go to a Christian church or you
Right.
know what I mean? I just can't go there. So I'm a believer, but I'm not religious. I don't know if that makes any sense. I really believe in the freedom of religion. I think you had another person on a long time ago that said that. And you'll learn more about me and why I feel that way. And part of it's because I've lived in other countries. I've worked with a lot of different cultures. So my knowledge about world religion is a lot broader than the average American.
Yeah, to start off, what did your involvement with religion or the 2 by 2 church look like? I understand it looks like you joined a little bit later in your childhood.
I was born in Washington State near Falls City, Washington, in Snoqualmie. I don't know if you're familiar with that area.
I am.
I was
Yeah, I
I was
grew up in
born in
Seattle, so.
yeah, I was raised like 20 minutes outside of Seattle or 20 miles outside of Seattle on a dairy farm. So I was born on the dairy farm when in the 70s. So I was baptized Catholic when I was probably, I think you're 3 months old when you're baptized as a Catholic, like an
Hmm.
infant. And my parents were both Catholic. And they had a dairy farm in Washington, and my dad dairy farmed with his dad, and they had a successful dairy farm. Like we were fine financially. We lived in a nice house and everything. We were happy. And when I was 5 years old, my dad sold the dairy farm to his two brothers because his dad wanted to retire my grandpa. And they moved to Eastern Washington to farm separately from the family because the Sauvage brothers there was four brothers and they all like farmed together and sold the dairy to the
Hmm.
two brothers. And so my dad sold out to them, took his money, and he went on a farm in Eastern Washington. We were in Royal City and some other small towns like Ephrata, Washington, like in Eastern
Yeah.
Washington. He did a couple different dairy farms. It didn't work out. Then he moved to Moses Lake, Washington. Have you ever heard of Moses Lake? It's
Yeah,
like,
I mean, I drive through it every
yeah,
time you go from the
like
east
between
to the
Seattle
west.
and Spokane, it's right there,
Yeah.
Grant County. Anyway, they lived there, and I was. They had two more kids after I was. There was two girls that were born, and then my brother and sister were born when I was 5, and like they were 5 years younger than me, like 3.5, 5 years younger than me. So there was like two older girls and then the two younger kids,
Hmm.
and there's like a big age gap between. So we were kind of raised like the two groups, kind of. So they moved to Moses Lake when I was 5 or 6, maybe 6, because my baby sister was already born, and they decided to join a local church. So I think they went to like a Presbyterian church for a while, and they went to a couple other like local churches. But my dad had done business with a really nice dairy farmer called Oliver Nelson. He was from Washington, like Western Washington. My dad had done business with him when he had the dairy farm, and they were part of the Truth Church, the 2x2s. Somehow they invited my parents to go to meeting when I was like 6.5, because my little sister was like a year old and my brother was like 2. Um, and my older sister must have been like 7 or 8. So we were pretty
Hmm.
young. But you have to understand, between the day I was born and the day my parents joined the religion, I had 15 first cousins on my dad's side, and I have 28 first cousins on my mom's side.
Oh wow.
And so we always had Christmas, Easter, like New Year's Eve parties. Like everybody is really nice. Most of them are Catholic or Presbyterian or Methodist or whatever, but they always celebrated Christmas. There was tons of uncles, tons of aunts. They were all in Washington State, in between Seattle
Mm,
area and Yakima. So you're
right.
talking, my mom had 8 siblings and they're all married with kids, and then my dad had, there's 5 of them and they're all married with kids. So you can imagine, I had, my whole life was like an amazing childhood, right? And I was a happy kid. Like I remember I had a dog, I had a cat on the dairy farm. I was playing outside all the time. And so when we moved to town in Moses Lake, my dad started working for a tractor company as a mechanic or a salesperson, I can't remember. But they started going to meeting. And it was my mom that was kind of sucked into it. She was in her young 30s and she was kind of depressed because we didn't really have a lot of relatives in Moses Lake. And I think she just
Hmm.
got sucked in because of the love bombing. You know what I'm talking about? Like potlucks,
Absolutely.
dinners, and
Yep.
so Oliver Nelson and his wife were really nice. They were in their 50s, and they invited my parents to meet the young couples in their 30s that lived in Moses Lake. So there was a lot of young families at this time, because I think back then in the 80s, a lot of people were joining the religion. And I've looked
Yeah.
it up later, and I think that was a high point of the religion was the 80s. Like it was like the Jesus movement was in the 70s. So all those all those people were now adults with kids. Does that make sense? And it was
Yeah,
like,
it really does, and especially, I mean, Moses Lake is kind of a podunk town in the middle of nowhere,
yeah,
but
farm town.
it does have it's closest to Seattle, and the Spokane area has had a lot of 2 by 2s
Yeah.
in it as well, so
I think it was just growing. So anyway, my parents joined the religion, and so you have to understand. So I was watching Little House. We had a black and white TV in Moses Lake. I would go to kindergarten, then first grade, and I'd come home at like 3 o'clock, watch Little House on the Prairie. We had cartoons on Saturday morning. We had Christmas presents. We had a tree with the tinsel. We had like this the normal stuff. And I wore,
yeah.
my hair was short because I have really curly hair. I had like ringlets. I wore little tops with the matching pants. We played outside. We had just a normal kid. Like my parents were happily married. They were good people. My dad didn't party or drink or smoke. My mom was like a young wife that was a super good housekeeper and really a full-time mom. Like everything was like, in my opinion, was good for a kid. I didn't have any
Mhm.
emotional problems. I didn't fight. I didn't get spankings. I don't remember getting spanked. I don't remember fighting. I would fight with my older sister, but I don't remember any childhood drama at that time. I really don't, to be honest. I know I wet the
Interesting.
bed until I was 3 or 4, but that's a normal thing. We had
Yeah.
babysitters that would take care of us. We had swimming lessons in the summer. We played outside. We had cats, whatever, just normal stuff. And then my mom joined. So she professed first. And okay,
Mhm.
so this is what happened. So I was 6.5. So I remember just like yesterday. Like I'm one of those people that has an elephant memory.
Oh, sure.
Okay, so Daryl Sylvester was the worker in Moses Lake around that time. So he was like kind of everybody like worshipped him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Have you heard
He was
of
the
him?
overseer too, right?
Was he? I guess. I mean, I'm just
Yeah,
remembering
I'm pretty sure he was the overseer in the 70s and 80s.
he came into our home, and we lived in this little house in Knowles Vista area of Moses Lake. We lived in a 1,500 square foot house, a 3 bedroom, 2 bath little house with 4 little kids, and a housewife and her husband. he would come into the house when my dad was at work, and he sat in my mom's rocking chair. She had like a rocking chair where she took the top, because we had two
Mhm.
toddlers. I remember both of the kids were in diapers. He would sit in our rocking chair like this, and he would talk to my mom, and he had that gruff voice. And I remember him because I was 6.5, and my older sister was like 8 years old. He told my mom she had to get rid of all her pants. She had to. We all had like really curly hair, so he's like, you need to grow your kids' hair out. And we had a big bookshelf in the rec room
Holy
full of
crap.
books because my dad read a lot, my mom read a lot, so
Yeah.
he told us that whole bookshelf we had to burn. Like we had, yeah, we had like the National Geographic. We had, well, we had an
Mhm.
encyclopedia, but we had all these books just because they read. My dad went to Wazoo. He had a degree in agriculture. Plus, he just read a lot. We had to get rid of the black and white TV. We had to get rid of Christmas. We had to get rid of Easter. We had to get rid of all of our clothes. I did have one brother, so that was fine. He didn't have to change his outfits. But and my mom's like, well, what do I do? Like he just came in. She just let him. I mean, she was young and naive, I think. She just let him come in and just tell her what to change about her life. Like he just sat in the chair or the living room and told her what to do. He came on over several visits. I remember this vividly. And I remember she's like, what do I do? Because I have a big garden on the side of the house and I have to hoe the garden. And you want me to wear a dress hoeing the
And
garden? You know
and
what he
so
told her to do? He told her to buy a long skirt and pin it
had your
with
dad
baby pins
okay.
between her legs, like diaper
Come
pins.
on. Come on,
Yeah,
man.
no, I'm not. This is not a joke. So my mom's 79.
This was before your dad had professed? Or
Correct. This was like when she professed first, and then she had to do all these changes because we were just regular worldly people with a normal,
Mhm.
everyday 1980s family. This was probably late
Yeah.
70s. Yeah, this was the late 70s. So he told her she should buy a long skirt and use diaper pins because back in the day they used those diaper pins, for the kids before the Velcro and all that. He told her to put diaper pins in between the skirt so you to hold her. It was still a skirt, but
Nice.
when she bent over to pick the weeds for the garden, it would she would still be wearing a skirt. Does that make sense? And she
Yeah,
was
and basically almost turned a skirt into pants.
right. Yeah, and I remember that was one thing she balked at. I remember after he left, she's like, "That doesn't make any." I think she called it a crock of shit or something. She's
Mhm.
like, "That's a crock." So she kept one pair of jeans.
Yeah.
She had one pair of jeans. I remember they were kind of like what I have on now. They were the 1970s bell bottoms. So the things kids remember, right? It's so funny. Anyway, like if I told that story, she would say, "Yeah, that's the right story," because story was told many times. Because he was just an old gruff guy that would just sit there in the chair, right? Anyway, so as a kid, it kind of sucked for me because like all of a sudden, um, well, this was some of the stuff my mom did, and like a lot of it is just from my memory. But my mom had 8 siblings, so she was one of 8. So she wrote letters to all of her
Mm, sure.
siblings. And yes, this isn't my story to tell, but she's told this story multiple times, and it's part of my story. So if I'm mistaken or someone's offended, that's too bad. So she wrote letters to all of her siblings and said, dear brother and sister, I'm no longer going to celebrate Christmas because it's worldly and it's pagan because of the tree and whatever reason that the workers had explained to her. And she's like, we no longer celebrate
Wow.
Christmas. Please don't send my kids gifts. And she told my grandparents not to give us gifts. And we got Christmas cards from like, 50 relatives every year. She sent them back, return to
Mhm.
sender. So what do you call it? She bought all in. And now as an adult, I realize it's all legalism, like the
Right.
rules and stuff. She bought all in. Like she got rid of the
Wow.
TV. She got rid of her clothes. She changed her hair. She quit wearing earrings. She quit wearing her wedding ring. She had a gorgeous diamond ring. She put that ring in a box for 25 years. She took her earrings out. She started wearing, her hair was really curly, like short. She grew it out and she put it into a French roll. We started having people spend, like strange men started sleeping in our bedroom. So we had 3 little girls in one bedroom. And then my brother was like 3 years old and he had his own bedroom. So when the 2 workers, I remember it was like
Mhm.
Mike Hardiman, Mark
Yeah.
Huddle, um, and like Sterold and a few other people that the names, like I think Wayne Bechtel was in our field. Like these were the late 70s. So these, like Mike Hardiman and it was Mike and Mark. So Mike Hardiman and Mark Huddle were like some of the first workers I remember. So all 3 of us little girls, we had 3 single beds in a row with Holly Hobby, bedspreads and all of our stuffed animals. So we would clean our room and then we would go sleep in the living room so Mark
Okay.
and Mike could have our room. And we did that all the time because my dad was friends with all the male workers because he was the same age. So my dad professed like about a year later after my mom did.
Mhm.
He wasn't. So I asked him about 6 months ago when I was visiting. He's 83 years old now, and I asked him, I'm like, "What did you think about it? Why did you convert? To this religion? Because you went to Catholic high school, like in Seattle, and I don't get it." He's like, well, your mom wanted to join, and they were really nice. They had kids our age, they had potlucks, and the kids were all the same age as our kids, you know. And your mom liked it, so I was fine
Right.
with it. He's like, I focused on making money, and your mom, it was your mom's thing, and I just joined because they seemed nice enough, and I didn't have to pay money. They told my mom she didn't take a, they didn't take a collection. They said there's no money, so we won't. You just give us a couple dollars when we visit, but there's no money involved. It's free, which we know now it was never free. Anyway, there was a lot of changes in our life as a kid, and I started wearing my hair back like this, you know, and I she got rid of all my clothes, and I had to wear skirts. Um,
Mhm.
and we were told, this is the part that I don't like talking about this part, but we were told. So I was really close to my grandma Sauvage, my dad's parents, because they had lived next to me on the dairy farm
Wow.
when I until I was 5, and I love my grandma. And she died about 9 years ago, and she was 106 years old. And to the day she died, I was like really close with her. Um, I think
No, it's
about her every
okay.
week, but
Take your time.
she loved me more than, I don't know. I can't even see. This is where it's so stupid. Like this is where this is why I want to talk about this stuff, because it's like I've gone to counseling to deconstruct, but this is where I want to talk about it, because maybe there's parents that are still in the church that, because I'm old now, like I'm middle aged, right?
Right.
So this was years ago, but we were told as children when we joined the Truth Church, the 2x2 church, that all of the people that were outside of the truth were going to hell. So the people that loved me the most was my grandma and my grandpa, really like salt of the earth people. My cousins and
So
some of
much
my
for
aunts
a
I was close
kid to
with.
hold.
They always gave us gifts for Christmas. They liked the children, you know, they were into the kids and the nieces and nephews. They were
Mhm.
all going to hell. I was 6.5 years old, and my grandma was going to hell because she was Catholic and not in the 2x2 church. She didn't go to meeting. And then my mom's parents were in Yakima. They were pretty wealthy because they had a really prosperous orchard,
Right.
and her mom had money to buy us nice gifts, but she was also told not to give us gifts. So they were going to
It's
hell
alright.
too. And so everybody was going to hell. So that was hard for me as a kid. I can't believe I just got teared up about that. But that's one of the things that was
Mhm.
hard for me. It was all of a sudden everybody that I loved that cared about me too was going to hell. So our new family became the truth people, the 2x2s. And the good thing about, you know, and I'm not going to say like my whole childhood
Right.
was a bad childhood. That's not true. We became close friends with some of the families that had kids our age, you know, and we had fun. Like we all had farms, and we would float down the canal, or we'd play in the lake. We lived on the lake. We'd go
Mhm.
uh, in the winters. We'd go ice skating, and you know, we'd have inner tubes and go down the snow. Like, you know, my parents had potlucks. We'd go to their houses for dinner after church and whatever, that type of thing. But
Yeah.
the school really sucked because you probably heard about this from other people, but the kids made fun of me like really bad. So I remember what it was like before they joined. I was kind of a normal first grader, normal kindergartner, and I had friends. I was shy, but I had friends. And then by second grade, I remember um, second grade, the kids started making fun of me, and I started to get bullied. And they told me I was ugly because I wore my hair back really tight, and I had to wear like I had to wear
Right.
dresses. And I like for Valentine's Day, I wasn't allowed to do the little Valentine's Day cards. So I had to sit out like, and I then they had like this annual like parade for the Halloween, and I wasn't allowed to wear a costume because that was worldly, and it was devil worshiping for your kid to put on a plastic mask and walk in the Halloween. So I had to sit out all the holiday stuff with the other kids, and so you know I became like the weirdo, right? And what happened to me was like my older sister got pissed off, like she became angry. Like I
Mhm.
remember her as a young kid. I remember she was mad a lot at kids at school. She wore a bun. Like she was 2.5 years older than me, so she was wearing a bun to school like when she was in seventh grade.
Mhm.
Like she had to do the whole like she was treated older because she was a little bit older. But they made fun anyway. So I became introverted and a little depressed, and she got angry. So I think everybody's different in how they process like um,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's called trauma, but about a year ago, I decided I wanted to be a counselor, and I took about a year's worth of classes in licensed married family therapy, and I've learned a lot about like psychology and stuff. It's now they call it trauma, but back then, now I don't know if I'm going to do this. I don't think I'm going to continue to be if I'm going to continue with that program because it's a little too much work, and I make more money doing what I do now. So
Sure.
I don't know if I'll ever finish it, but I did learn a lot from the psych classes. So back in the day, like when I was a kid, it was like buck up, I grew up on a farm, so it was like, oh, get over it.
Yeah.
You weren't allowed to show emotions. You weren't allowed to, be hurt or call it anything. So even though it could have been childhood trauma, we didn't call it that. We just had to suck it up and move on,
Right.
right?
Right.
But so I became introverted and depressed, and she became angry. That's kind of how we dealt with it. So what I wanted to talk about was anxiety.
Yeah.
So we were taught the people that said like the F word, people that had a TV, people that celebrated Christmas were going to go to hell. And and I've talked to my parents about this, and I said, you guys told us that if you cut your hair, you're going to hell. And they're like, no, we didn't teach you that. And I'm like, well, that's what I learned from the platform. That was kind of the indoctrination, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so this kid in my fourth grade class said the F word, right? And we got in trouble at school. And so I came home from school and I told my mom I learned the F word, and I told her the word and everything. And she's like, oh my God, that's a really bad word. They used to wash our mouth out with soap. I don't know if I got it that time, but I just remember laying in my bunk bed at night and I kept saying the F word in my mind, like kind of, what was the word you used for that? Like religious
Well, yeah, I mean, scrupulosity, or even like it's almost like an OCD type
Yeah.
tendency.
And I remember I started crying. My dad came in and I'm like, I'm going to go to hell because I said the F word. And like, so I had the fear of hell, um, and it was like the burning in the fire started with
Mhm.
me since I was 7.
Wow.
Um, and I started having, now that I'm an adult and I've learned about mental health, I started having like mental health issues when I was 7. So the kids at school would make fun of me, and my mom, I started scratching my own face.
Mm.
Why?
Mhm.
Like I remember yelling, "Why do they hate me so much?" And I scratched my own face
Right.
because. And I've talked to my counselor over the years. Why did I do that? And they're like, because you didn't have words. How did kids know how to deal with that? Um, those emotions. So everybody was mean to me at school, and they threw spit wads at me, and they were mean to me on the playground and in classroom. They called me the ugliest girl in the class, and so I would scratch my own face. My mom had to stop me. I did it one time, and I had these severe like scratches. It took a while to heal. It looked like a cat had
Mhm.
attacked me. And then I did some other stuff, like I started biting other kids in the classroom. I was acting out really weird. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I mean, it sounds like it's the acting out of a traumatized kid. I mean, you're trying to process things that you don't have the ability to process, or you don't have the support to process.
I remember my mom said I did the scratching the face, and I didn't even understand it at the time. And my older sister thought I was crazy, but my mom said, if you keep that up, I'm going to have to take you to a psychiatrist. And this was back in the day when going to a psychologist or a psychiatrist was like, the way she said it made me feel mortified, like I was ashamed.
Right. Right.
And so she never did take, she probably should have taken, now that we know about childhood trauma, she should have taken me to someone to talk to. But back in
Yeah.
those days, this was probably 1980 or whatever. Back in those days, people didn't know about that stuff, and they didn't really, it wasn't common.
Yeah.
So anyway, I had some acting out that one time I didn't want to go to meeting, so I sat in the back. We had a station wagon, like Vacation. What's that movie called?
Yeah, National Lampoon's Vacation.
The kind with the paneling on the sides. And they
Yeah.
put me in the dress, and I had my hair in a bun, and I was 7.5 years old, and I started screaming, "I'm not gonna go to meeting!" And I screamed, and I sat in the back in the station wagon. So they took me inside the house. I got a spanking, and they put me with all my clothes on in the shower. Nowadays, they wouldn't like parents would not be advised to do that kind of extreme measures, but my parents didn't know what to do with me because
Right.
I would get so emotional about having to go to meeting. And it was at that time they started spanking me. So I had if I was 7, the other kids were like 2, 3, and then a 9-year-old, and I was 7. They started to spank me, and we didn't ever get spankings until they joined the 2x2s. And I think that
Mhm.
because back in the day, they used to take all the kids out of the meeting and beat the shit out of them. It was
Yeah, I
really
mean,
bad.
it was the example that they were given.
Yeah, so they would. My parents they didn't take us out of meeting to beat the shit out of us, but some of the parents did. Like they'd take.
Yeah.
There was this one family, and I won't say any names because the kids are probably like in their 30s now, but they had 4 little girls in Moses Lake. Their dad would one of the baby even when the babies were 3 months old and they were just starting to sit up, or he would take those girls out and beat the shit out of them. You could hear them screaming. It was really bad.
Yeah.
My dad took me out like once or twice when I was 7 or 8, and they never hit the older girl because she was like 9. But they would when the workers would visit, we would get spankings. But when they were gone, they did. I think there was like some type of peer pressure by the other parents to
Yeah.
spank, because I didn't get spanking when I was 3, 4. I don't remember. I don't think
Right.
so. My grandma said she didn't remember me getting hit when I was 3 and 4. I've talked to her about this, but well,
Hmm.
I remember getting hit when I was 7, 8, 9, 10. So my parents moved to a farm, and I had to ride the bus an hour to and from school.
Oh wow.
And they were horrible. The kids were horrible on the bus because there's only one bus driver, then the whole bus is full of rowdy kids.
Hmm.
And the bus was like the worst. They would throw spit wads at me. They would pull my dress. They would pull my braids. They would call me ugly and all kinds of stuff. When I was like 33 years old, I was married, and my husband and I, we went on a trip to Puerto Rico, and we went to some island called Vieques, and we were going to go on a snorkeling trip. And I was already out of the religion and whatever. I was already living in LA, and so the the tour company said, okay, there's going to be a school bus pick you guys up to go snorkeling. So we went in this old converted American school bus, and we got on the bus to have them drive us down to where we were going to do this snorkeling trip. Oh my God, I got on the friggin' school bus and I started having a panic attack. And my husband looked at me and he's like, what's wrong with you? I was like, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm having panic attack because I'm on this friggin' school bus. It was because of
Wow.
I was like, I just have to get off the bus. I mean, I I had a panic attack because it reminded me of when I used to ride the bus. I was a very sensitive kid, and
Hmm.
now they call it a highly sensitive HSP or whatever, highly sensitive person. I don't know what. I was very sensitive as a child, so whatever they told me, you're going to go to hell if you cut your hair. Whatever they preached from the platform, I was like a
Right.
sponge. And
Right.
I think
Right.
other kids, I've talked to other adults that were raised in the truth. Other kids, it just kind of bounced off their back. But for whatever reason, I was highly sensitive. I was like very artistic. Now I'm a handbag designer. I was a shoe designer. Like I was very
Hmm.
artistic, very like emotional, very sensitive kid. So I think whatever that happened between when they changed from just a regular family to the 2 by 2 cult, so for some reason, out of all their kids, it affected me the worst, I think. And it could have been
Hmm.
that age like 6, 7, 8. That's really important years for children. That's when they switched
Yeah.
it all over, and that's when they started telling me I was going to go to hell if I did this or that. I'm not sure. So that anxiety started really young, but it didn't. And then some of the funny stories, like, okay, so we moved to a farm, and I started getting older. I became, I was very outspoken, shy but outspoken, and I was made fun of until I was about 14 on the bus, and then I would tell the kids to f off. Like I went from
Hmm.
like this to like I became like kind of not outspoken like at home. I wouldn't say anything bad or whatever, but just I became like tough. And
Yeah.
so my parents were really strict about all the rules and everything. And like when I was 12, have you ever heard of Jan Demon?
Yeah.
She's a word.
Yeah. I know Jan. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So my mom had her come over. Like we would sneak. Like my sister was 2.5 years older, so we had like a mascara my mom found, and I was 12, and so at that age you want to start trying out makeup and whatever. I still couldn't wear jeans under any circumstances, but she had Jan Demon come over, and we lived in this like double wide trailer on this farm. And Jan Demon came into the girls' bedroom. We all three of the girls shared a bedroom, so we had like a 14-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 7-year-old all in one bedroom. And I just remember Jan Demon came into the bedroom, and she's like, "Why do you girls think you want to try makeup? That's worldly. You don't want to look like a harlot. Like there's some verses in the Bible about some harlot that paints her face, or I don't even know the verses.
Right. Right.
She's like, you girls don't want to be a harlot. Why do you want this stuff? And she asked us about wearing mascara. Just stupid shit. Just complete bullshit. Like, that's what we had to worry about. Like, I'm like, what the, like as an adult, I'm like, why would you have a worker come in there and talk to your daughters about a little thing of mascara that you found in their bedroom when you guys should be focused on raising young adults that are like positive role models and
Yeah.
well-rounded young women, and instead of like make sure your hair's in a bun, make sure you have your dress on, and make sure you don't wear any mascara. You should be focused on how are your grades, Tara? um, how are you getting along with your friends down the street? What are your plans? Do you want to go to college? What do you want to be when you grow up? Instead it was about, did you, well, of course we cleaned our room and we had chores. My mom was a really good housekeeper, so but it was like, did you cut your bangs? Why did you have this mascara? That's worldly. It was instead of
Yeah.
focusing on like raising good humans, it was focused on legalistic, really dumb shit rules. Like, let's just be honest. And
Yeah.
so that they would send the workers in to talk to us, and it was just stupid.
Yeah.
So
No, I can't. And as a kid, though, you're like these people are like the authority figures, and
we're,
so you're like caught between like just doing what they say,
yeah,
or there's consequences to that, to not doing it. So
yeah.
yeah.
But I
No.
even by the time I was like 12, 13, 14, I was like, what? Like it didn't make any
Yeah.
sense. So anyway, in Moses Lake, there was a child molester. We had moved to Moses Lake in the late 70s, and we joined the religion around the 1980s, late 70s, early 80s. That's when my parents kind of got into it. So
Mhm.
there was a child molester called Abe Eldy in Moses Lake, and at the time we joined the religion, no one told my parents that he was a child molester. Um, because they didn't tell my parents who the bad people were in the church. It was just like everybody's perfect. Like what is that saying? The way is perfect, the people aren't. But no one told,
Mhm.
to an old man that's a predator. We were cute kids. When I look back
Right.
at pictures of all four of us together with our hair in little buns, we were the cutest little kids. But no one told my mom when she was 30 or young 30-year. She had us when she started having us when she was in her 20s. She had all of her kids in her 20s, so she was a young mom. No one
Mhm.
told her to be on the lookout for predators, known predators.
Wow.
Anyway,
And by this point, like Abe was known, like he'd already been in the legal system for this
I
stuff,
guess
right?
in 1983 he was convicted of child. He got a conviction in 1983, and I think it was a neighbor kid, like a worldly, like a neighbor person in his. So they had meeting in his home for decades, even though I don't think
Mhm.
he was an elder. But anyway, him and his wife were probably in their 70s. So we lived on a farm. I think it was 10 to 12 miles outside of town. We had 200 acres. We had pigs. We had um, we had a horse. We had this big feedlot full of cattle. I mean, my dad, that's how he made a living. He was now a
Yeah.
farmer, right? And this old man, we weren't close to Abe Eldy and his wife. They had like a bunch of daughters and they had other grandkids. We weren't close. We had my grandparents. So even though my grandparents were Catholic and the other ones were Methodist, they still would visit us on the farm and we would see them. They didn't give us Christmas gifts. They weren't allowed to do Christmas or anything, but they would come like in the summer or whatever. So, and I was still really close to my grandma. I would go to her house in Fall City 1 week every summer. She would take me shopping at the Bellevue Square Mall and all that kind of stuff. So, Abe Eldy was starting to come out to our farm and bring toys. So he brought games for the kids, and they were kids' games. And I remember when I was 12 or 13 or so, I thought it was kind of weird that he was coming out to the farm because he wasn't our grandpa. But now that I'm adult, he was grooming us and
Mhm.
he did it 2 or 3 times. Him and his wife came out. They would drive all the way out to the farm, way out in the boonies, and bring games. This went on, and then he went away after a while. He couldn't get close to us because my mom was a housewife, and she would watch us like a hawk. And I know why now. Later, she was a victim of some kind of thing when she was a little girl, so she had a good eye for her daughters, right?
Mhm.
So he quit visiting for a while. Then he started calling the house. We had a farm, and he would call that. We had one phone on the wall. He would call the house, asking my older sister for to go out for lunch with him. People are like, "How do you know this, Tara? This was like 40 years ago, or 35, 40 years ago." Because I kept a diary from the time I was 10 years old until I was about 32. I have diaries, like
Mm.
books. I went back and
Wow.
read it. Like in the past year, I've read it. So he would call the house to ask her for lunch, to pick her up at the high school to take her to lunch. She was in 10th grade. She was 16, 15, 16. And
Man.
he was never home because she had her own car and she had a little job after school working as an admin assistant for an insurance company or whatever. I forgot the details, but he would call the landline. And anyway, he didn't get to have lunch with her yet or anything. So my mom used to take my little sister was like in first grade or whatever, but she would pick her up from school and then take her to McDonald's. You remember back in the day, McDonald's had those playgrounds.
Mhm.
Yeah, in the
Yep.
80s. So she would take my little sister to the McDonald's after school to play on the playground. And she was in there one day, and the old lady, the wife of Abe Eldy, was in the McDonald's. And she came up to my mom and she's like, "Hi, my husband is interested in your daughter." And my mom's like, "What?" So
Wow.
the wife of this child molester confided in my mother that the reason he was coming out to the farm, the reason he was calling was because he was interested in her daughter who was in 10th grade.
Holy shit.
So it was the wife that warned my mom because none of the workers or none of the friends or none of the other mothers in our meetings or in our town. So we didn't meet with him for Sunday morning. I think we went to their house for a meeting for like unions or whatever, but we
Mhm.
didn't see him every week. But he was going out of his way to come to our farm and call the house to see my sister. So the wife was probably 75 years old lady. She confided in my mom, and so my mom, her antenna went up. And to make a long story short, he started. And the reason I know this is because I talked to my mom about 6 months or a year ago. I went back to Moses Lake to visit, and I brought this up, and I asked her questions, and she told me that's what happened.
Mhm.
That's why I know this is recent conversations with people that my parents are still alive. So whatever, this is real stuff. a real corroborated story. Um,
Yeah.
so anyway, my mom's antenna went up, and so he started going to the high school. He one day he went to the, I believe he went to the high school to have her. You could go to the high school and ask for the kids to come to the office. You could take them out of school. I
Right.
believe he went to the high school to take her out of class to take her to lunch or whatever. He was hanging out the high school somehow. So my older sister told my mom, she's like, Mom, this guy, he's following me. He's at the high school. So my parents went down. My parents contacted his parole officer and they went and had a meeting with his parole officer. So apparently he was on parole. The parole officer said, well, since your daughter is 16, we can't do anything about it because she's 16. She's not a minor in the state of Washington. I guess at
Come on.
the time,
Oh.
at that time, you couldn't do anything legally because she was technically 16 or older. The reason I know that. I'm just looking at my notes here. The reason I know that is because I asked my sister about it in the past year. My sister's married now and has 3 adult children, like whatever. She said that was why, what had happened was she was already 16. So they couldn't do anything legally. But anyway, the workers were called. So according to my diary, when I was 14, the workers were at convention in Walla Walla. So this must have happened in the spring. I'd have to look at the date. It
Hmm.
was in the mid 80s, right? The workers were called. It was Yvonne Dubuque and some other worker, another sister worker. They were called and the complaint was put through. So he was reprimanded by the workers at that time, but he still had meeting in his home for for years afterwards. And all I know is that in the 90s, he was convicted again, I guess, and he went to jail for like 5 or 6 years.
Hmm.
And he wrote a letter to my parents 18 years after this happened and apologized. I think he was in jail when he wrote it. And I just
Wow.
remember my mom complaining that it took 18 years for him to apologize. And after all this trauma that he had brought to the family and all the stress he had caused my parents, no one apologized for it except he did 18 years later by letter. Maybe he felt guilty or whatever. Anyway,
Right. Wow.
so here's the thing about child molesters. I think if you're in this religion or any religion and you know of someone that's like a convicted child molester or has allegations, I think what they're doing now, I think it's a good service. It's a good public service announcement where they put these people's names on the internet. I think it's good to know, especially if you have children.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, because of, I mean, as you just said, the legal system uh, is a failure in a lot of this, and so yeah, I mean, our community has to take things into our own hands essentially, and that's why yeah, putting these people's names on the internet is the next best thing. At least people are aware, and they can make that choice for whether they're going to have their family around them or not.
This cover up society, like that's just an example, and that was in the 80s.
It was just the regular workings of the
Yeah,
church. Like they knew about him from whenever he first got arrested for what he was doing. And I don't know, I can't predict what was going through like Thorold's mind when he or whoever the overseer was at the time
yeah,
when they let that just go. But it's got to be. I'm sure it was. Well, he probably, he says he's sorry and
well, he's
he's
old. He's nothing to
doing.
do with
Oh, yeah, he's old. Yeah, if he was in his 70s, then
it.
I think
Mhm.
especially back then there was this idea that like somebody who's old would be harmless or something. When in reality, like I don't know what the statistics are of the people in the church that have been perpetrators, but a lot of them were abusing kids well into their 70s, 80s, even 90s.
Yeah. And that one guy, some of the ministers, like Ira Hobbs, didn't he date rape some, or no, he gave him a roofie or something, and he raped him.
Yeah, I mean, he raped a
Oh,
sister worker when he was, I think, 90 or 91.
well, she was out of Vermont. She was not. She was passed
Yeah, I mean,
out.
she was drugged as well.
Yeah, like he did. Like what was that guy's name? That was he had that TV show. See, we didn't have a TV, so the African American actor from Hollywood. He would roofie all of his victims.
Oh, like Bill Cosby?
Yeah, yeah, he did a Bill
Yeah,
Cosby. That's the
right.
whole. He did something like that, like really horrible
Yeah,
stories. But anyway, so the good news is, nothing, none of those men got near us as children, and I thank my mom for that. She she even watches people now. Like she's one of those moms that watched her kids like a hawk, you know.
yeah,
So thank God, because she was naive. She was trusting, she trusted everybody because she was in the
right.
truth church. Like everybody was perfect. And I remember she would complain sometimes because her kids weren't as perfect as the Hanson's kids or the Dirks kids or whoever other prominent families. So we were never, I sometimes people talk, we were never part of the royal family because we were just kind of middle class farmers. We weren't rich. We didn't have a big house. My dad was very friendly and outgoing, and my mom was kind of shy. But we weren't royalty, right? Because we weren't multiple
Right.
generation. I was the first. Would I be the first I wasn't born into it, but the stories could go on and on because there's so many stories, right? But so so anyway, we weren't allowed to date until we were 16. That was the rule.
Okay.
So, my mom, when I was 14, she's like, okay, you girls can get one pair of jeans each and wear them to the basketball game so people can't look up your skirt. So by the time I was 14, we still, it was a sin to have a Christmas tree, and Christmas was worldly and all those rules were still in place. But, I didn't profess yet or anything until I was 14. But at that age, she said, you guys can have one pair of jeans. And she kind of became less legalistic.
Hmm.
So I went to my older sister was 2.5 years older, and she was like working right away at 16, had her own car. She We went to Milltown. I met this kid at Milltown named Eric. He was 18. Well, he was probably 17 when I met him. I was like 14. Anyway, when he was 18, we wrote letters to each other. But so I couldn't date until I was 16. So when I was 15, he asked me if I could go to his senior prom.
Okay.
And I had never kissed a boy before. I had never touched a guy. I had never been with boys at all. Like I was totally like innocent, right? And my mom's like, okay, well, he's a nice professing boy. You can go to his senior prom. So he drove all the way from Montana to pick me up, and we drove back to his house. I met his parents, and I went to the prom, senior prom. It was like, the typical prom. We had steak and lobster with his friends, and they had
Hmm.
their drinks or whatever. Oh my God. Like he was kind of predatory, even he was a predator even back then. So um, he tried to do something, and I freaked out and ran out of the room. And then the next day I took a Greyhound bus home.
Oh
I was
wow.
15. And I'm not going to go into detail about it because it's kind of like one of those things. It's not worth talking about, whatever, but it didn't end well. Um, he didn't do anything illegal, but he was basically trying to have sex with me, and I was just a really
Yeah.
innocent kid, and I didn't know
Yeah.
what I didn't know what you were supposed to do on first dates. I had no idea. I mean, I
Right.
knew boys kiss
And
girls.
and this was a first date. It's not like you had
No, I
established a relationship or
no, I
anything.
had never kissed a boy before. So all of a sudden, I'm in his
Wow.
house going to prom, and his parents were there most of the time, but they weren't there some of the time. And he was 18. And anyway, uh, he put me back on the Greyhound to go home. Nothing horrible happened. A couple years ago, I was reading on the X2x2 or one of those websites, and maybe your group, I can't remember, but it said that he was in jail for like raping a minor or something. The takeaway would be, this is what I'm okay with saying: just because a boy's professing doesn't mean he's a safe person. They could
Yeah.
be, they could have predatory behaviors even though their parents are meeting goers or they're professing. Anyway, that was
Yeah.
interesting to learn later as an adult that you know, I started dating at 16, 17. I was still a good kid. I didn't do drugs like cocaine or anything. Okay, this is what I did in high school. I had a couple beers and I smoked pot like a couple times. But I was a
Yeah.
really good kid. I didn't party crazy. I didn't, I wasn't promiscuous at all in high school. I was really good about that. I'm not saying I was perfect, but I was a good kid in general. I got good
Yeah.
grades and everything like that. But I cut my hair. I started babysitting. I used the money from babysitting. I wore regular clothes like other kids. I started wearing jeans and t-shirts like all the other kids. And I was, some of the friends in Moses like would talk to my parents about how, maybe we were bad influences on their daughters because we cut our hair and things like that. But I was just, I'm going to go to hell because I cut my hair. And I asked my mom one time, I'm like, when I die, are they going to open my casket? And on the judgment day, is God going to take out a ruler and measure my hair to see how long it is? And that's how good that I can go to heaven if my hair is like a certain amount of inches. Like it didn't make sense to me.
Yeah. And by this time you're 16, 17. Were you had you professed already?
The professing story. So I didn't want to profess because I was shy and I didn't want to speak in meetings because that's kind of tough if you're an introvert.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, totally.
my mom took me to Glen Valley Convention when I was 14, and they talk about at meeting like if you're 12, you should profess, otherwise you can go to hell.
That's the age that Jesus was when he went about his father's business, right?
So I put it off, and I had professing little girlfriends, but I put it off a couple years. I mean, I believed in God. I was okay with Jesus and all that, but I didn't really want to do those steps for whatever reason. But when I was 14, I stood up at Glen Valley Convention and I was super nervous. I had like anxiety all day. And I was so glad when I was so relieved when it was over, because now I knew if we got in a car accident on the way home from Glen Valley back to Moses Lake, I wouldn't, if we got in a car wreck or someone hit our car, it was me, my mom, and my sister that had gone to the convention. I wouldn't, if I died in a car wreck, I wouldn't go to hell. And
Right.
that's why I professed. And that whole thing is stupid. That's why I professed. So I wouldn't go to hell if I got in a car accident. Like it's so, I don't get it. Like now as an adult, I don't get it. Like, but that's why I professed, out of fear, not out of love, but out of fear. So the God that I was taught was a scary guy in the sky. And if you didn't follow this church, you're going to go to hell. He'll burn you
Yeah.
forever. And I couldn't understand how. Here's the part that I was confused about. So we were allowed to read whatever books we wanted. We would go to the library. And so I would read a history book. So my dad likes history too, but I would read about the Holocaust, right? You know, the Hitler and all that stuff. I would read adult books on the Holocaust. So my
Hmm.
question to myself was, if I cut my hair, and my hair was long, like, you know, if I cut my bangs or if I cut my hair, I'm going to hell and Hitler's in hell, right? Because he's a horrible person. If there is a hell, Hitler's going to be there, right? Because he killed like 6 million Jews and other people. But so I'm going to hell, like just like Hitler. It doesn't make any sense.
It does not make any sense. And just the, again, the fact that you had to like grapple with that as a teenager is just so, it's so sad.
I would read about like the communism and like what it was like to live in like Italy in the 1940s and in
Hmm.
Russia, like during the
Hmm.
communist years, where you would stand in line for a piece of bread, you know, and I would read about like how they would just kill you if you had a secret, like the KGB, and just I would read about the wars and things of that. I was always intrigued by historical stories and nonfiction. So I just couldn't understand how I was going to go to hell if I didn't follow all the rules of the truth, the two by two religion. But yet I didn't understand it. It didn't make sense. But of course, I was already brainwashed, and I had to believe it because that's what I was taught. My parents were diehard two by twos, and you know the whole hell thing is kind of dumb because one of the other reasons in Moses Lake. So I went to school to be a dental assistant when I was 17. There was a
Okay.
program. There was. Have you ever heard of Job Corps?
Yeah.
Like a government program. So I wasn't in Job Corps. It's usually for kids that have like a tough background. But there was a Job Corps right next to Moses Lake, and they had an agreement with the high school that all the kids that wanted to be in the dental program, if you wanted to be a dental assistant, you could go to these classes at the Job Corps. So I was like, well, I'm not going to go to college because I'm going to become a dental assistant. So I went to the classes my junior and senior year to be a dental assistant, and I was hired by a dentist in Moses Lake. So there was a beloved dentist. I'm not his name. I'll just call him Dr. H. He hired me when I was 17. So every day after school, I would go to his office from 3 o'clock to 5:30 and work as a dental assistant. So I would clean people's teeth. I would clean the instruments. I would sit with
Hmm.
him while he did root canals. He was a wonderful person. He was in his 40s, and he had Sunday morning meeting with me and my parents. And
Okay.
he had 3 kids, and the boys, he has 2 boys that were around my age, and his daughter was a lot younger. And his wife was this beautiful wife, and we saw them every Sunday for years. So you know, he knew my parents. He was a really nice man to me. He trained me how to be a dental assistant, and he had done my teeth since I was 8. So I knew him and I
Oh, sure.
trusted him. He was a good guy. He And so after high school, I went to work for him full time. And so uh, he had a really bad temper though. Like if he was doing like a root canal or something, and he couldn't find a tool, he would start yelling. And but I still loved him as a I just loved him. He was a good guy.
Yeah.
Um, it got kind of weird though, because towards the end of my high school year, he would have me come into his office and he would show me his gun collection. And he was a professing husband and a pillar of the community, but he had these Glocks. You know what a Glock is? It's like a
Yeah.
semi-automatic with
Yeah.
a handgun.
Yep.
And
Yep. And he
he
had
would,
these in his dentist office.
yes, because he told me his wife. So I was 17, or I had barely turned 18 when I graduated from high school, but I was 17 or 18, and I was really shy and everything like that. But he had these guns in the cases. So when you open the case like this, it's got the padding inside, and it has all the
Hmm.
different. The gun has like different things you can put on the end, like the silencer and all these different
Right.
fixtures. And he would open the case up and show me the guns. It looks like just like on TV. And he would get a new one every once in a while, and he would show it to me, like a Glock in a case, like a locked
Weird.
case. Yeah, weird.
Interesting.
He's
Yeah.
like, Tara, I just got a new gun. What do you think? And I'm like, oh my God. It was just bizarre. And I'm like, I felt kind of special. Like he was confiding in me. He was showing me his gun collection. And he's like, well, my wife doesn't like the guns in the house. So I just have them here. Because he had his own private office within the dental office, whatever.
Right, right.
So I worked for him for a while. And then I decided to move. As soon as I graduated from high school, I decided I wanted to leave because there was nothing for me there. My parents had a pig farm. There's no college there. I didn't want to live on the farm anymore. I didn't want to follow the rule. I just wanted to see the world.
Yeah.
So he, he, I had quit working for him like in June of my high school, after high school. And he got arrested for, he had a $1 million grow plant operation in his basement of his house for marijuana.
What?
Yeah. So he had a big house out, like just outside of town. And in the basement of the house it was a big house, maybe like 4,000, 5,000 square feet. I don't know. I've only been in it like twice, but the
Yeah.
basement, he had the lights and everything. And he was growing marijuana. And this was back in the late 80s when, or maybe it was 80, around 1989, 1990. This was around the time that, marijuana was still illegal in Washington
Yeah.
state.
Right.
So he spent 5 years in the state in a federal prison in Oregon or Washington or Oregon or both. I can't remember. I remember writing
Wow.
him a letter after I found out. He wrote me a couple letters from prison. So I was still friends with him. So the story is not about him so much. It's just like, but he was a perfect professing person and he was arrested and he was in jail. And I didn't worship him, but he treated me really well and he was very generous. He let me drive his sports cars to go pick up the mail when I worked for him. He was just a nice guy. He treated me
Hmm.
like a daughter, right? He was never
Right.
creepy or weird. The gun thing was kind of weird, but he was just never a creepy guy. He's a good guy. Even to this day, I still admire him in his own way. But my question to myself was, okay, if I go to hell for cutting my hair, he's in jail now. And he was like this professing man, right? It didn't
Right.
make any sense to me. So I started to question, like, I'm not saying I questioned my faith because of him, but it was just like all these things were happening and it didn't make sense to me. So by the time I left Moses Lake, I was already kind of like questioning the whole religion. So
Hmm.
I didn't have any money and I didn't have anywhere to go. So my parents didn't have any money to give me. So I had $300 from high school and my sister was living she's like, well, she was going to University of Washington and she's like, well, in the summertime they rent out rooms at the fraternities at the University of Washington. She's like, you can live in you can pay $300 and live with me in the fraternity because they rent out the rooms to girls during the summer because a lot of the
Hmm.
boys go home. So I lived in a fraternity at the University of Washington the summer after my high school. Oh my God. And it was a Jewish fraternity. So
Oh.
all the guys in the fraternity were Jews. And some even wore the yarmulke.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my God. So that was so I went from like being a really good 2x2 girl to living in a frat house and going to rush parties and frat parties and drinking and the keg parties and I worked as a dental assistant downtown Seattle. I would take the bus because I didn't have a car, and then I would on the weekends I'd go to the keg parties, and it was crazy. Like it was,
Oh my gosh, that's such a contrast to anything in Moses Lake.
yeah. And they were all Jews too. So like I didn't know anything about Jewish people. I had no idea. And they were all really wealthy. So they had these homes on Mercer Island and their dad had yachts and stuff. So they would take
Oh
me
yeah.
and my sister and there was a few other girls we became friends with that lived in the house because there was other girls that rented rooms there, like other college age kids. We would go on these yachts and they taught me how to water ski. Nice kids, like nice boys. Most of them were pretty good guys. They would look out for you because I was young. I was only 18.
Hmm. Right.
So I lived in this Jewish fraternity for 3 months, and then I decided I didn't want to go back to the pig farm because the University of Washington started up again, and I didn't apply for college because my grades weren't good enough to go to the University of Washington. So I went to live in Georgia with this lady who I was a nanny for, and
Oh wow.
I enrolled in an all black college in Savannah, Georgia. So here, and then I went to Georgia for one semester. I reached out to the workers when I got to Georgia. I went to a couple meetings in Savannah, and all the people there were like really backwards. There was mostly just elderly people.
Hmm.
This was in the deep South. I was in Richmond Hills, Georgia, which is right outside of Savannah. So I went to like two meetings, and I thought the people were really weird. So I never went back to meetings while I was there. But I worked as a cocktail waitress in a private club, and I went to an all black college. And I just remember walking around campus. So I was this white girl, right? And I was like, so all these people are going to hell because they're not professing. And most of the people in Moses Lake were white people that went to meeting. I'm
Right.
like, and these African American kids were really nice. They were like the ones they were all going to college. They wore really nice sweaters and they dressed really nice, nice kids, good. they weren't like the hip hop kids. They were just normal, everyday, like educated people. And it was just like, it was good for me to do that because it really opened my eyes to other people, right? And that was part of just growing up, I think was good. Okay, so I came back from Georgia and I went to Wazoo. Have you,
Okay, so how
Washington?
long were you in Georgia for?
One semester. And
Oh, so
I just
okay.
went to a couple meetings and I didn't date any boys really or anything like that. I lived with a worldly couple. The husband was a pilot and his wife and him would fight. He would beat her up and he gave her a black eye. So there was domestic violence going on.
Oh, geez.
And she was an alcoholic and they had a lot of marital problems. So I didn't want to live with them anymore. Even though I
Mm-hmm.
liked their kids and I loved them, I just didn't want to live with them because it was their my home life wasn't like that. So, if
Right.
you're beating your wife and I was 18, I'm like, I'm not this, I'm out. So I went to Pullman, I went to Wazoo, and I still went to meetings when I got to Pullman. So it was okay. It was like they had a lot of young people there. We had
Right.
potlucks, and I met a lot of people. Some of the people that I went to college with at Pullman, I've seen on your podcast. uh,
No, sure.
and I had friends and everything like that. I went to meeting like not every Sunday, but whatever. But I went to parties. I drank beer. I didn't party that hard. Maybe on the
Yeah.
weekends I'd have like 3 cheap beers. I wasn't like an alcoholic or anything. I wasn't promiscuous. I dated some guys um, from the school. I dated some athlete guys that were famous for the track and all that I'm still friends with many years later. So I dated worldly guys and stuff, but I didn't get close to anyone because we were supposed to get married to a professing guy, and whatever. So I was like, okay, well, you're supposed to marry someone like a professing guy. You're not supposed to be unequally yoked, right? You know what I'm talking
Right.
about.
Yep.
So when I was 20, I got this professing boyfriend, right? Um, like I said, we kissed and stuff, but that's it. That's it. Nothing too crazy. We didn't drink together. We would just go to the movies. We'd go out for dinner. We'd go to potlucks. We'd do sports, whatever. Just not platonic, but moderate,
Yeah.
normal
A
dating. Nothing.
very like kind of model 2 by 2
Yeah, it
relationship.
wasn't anything crazy. I don't think anything. Maybe it would be on kissing, but nothing crazy. We were both good kids, whatever. But he told me, he's like, well, he's like, I could never marry. He's like, I could never marry you because you don't wear your hair in a bun, and
Oh,
you
come
don't
fuck that.
wear dresses all the time. And so one time we were invited to like a 2 by 2 potluck at a young couple's house, and it was in the winter, and I showed up in leggings with a long wool sweater. Like I worked at Nordstrom's in the summers in Seattle, so I had really good clothes because I got the discount. I loved
Hmm.
fashion, so I had like the wool sweater, the matching pants, and the cool boots and whatever. And he's like, you can't wear that. He picked me up in the car, his car. He had a nice car. He's like, you can't wear that. The workers are going to be there. We were going to go play Uno and have a potluck. He's like, you should change. And I was only 20. And I remember telling him, I'm like, you change. I'm like, I'm not going to change. I'm like, it's like 5 degrees outside. I'm
Yeah.
like, that's stupid. I'm like, that's stupid. Why should I change my outfit when it's like below zero and it's freezing cold and there's snow on the ground? I'm like, no, I'm not going to change. He's like, well, the workers are going to be there. You should have a skirt on. I'm like, what difference does it make? I'm wearing leggings and a long wool sweater that covers my ass. Like, come on. And then he gave
Right.
me a lecture on not being professing enough. And then he told me if he ever got married, his wife would have to have her hair up in a bun before she could come out of the master bedroom. And she could only wear skirts. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm not your wife. I'm like, I'm not doing that. Like, you're too strict. I'm not going to wear a bun before I come out of my bedroom. Like, give me a break. Like, I just told him he was stupid. Like, I was already who I was at that age.
Yeah.
So by the
I
time I
can hear
was
that.
20, I was sarcastic. I was shy, but I was sarcastic and I knew who I was. Like I didn't need
Hmm.
you to tell me what to wear. Like I liked fashion. I would spend all my money on clothes and shoes and that was just who I was. And I didn't need you telling me what to dress. Like and I didn't like men telling me what to do. He was the last professing guy I dated for many, many years. I tried one more time after that, and he wasn't as hard on me, that guy. But anyway, so I went to Wazoo and it was kind of boring. I lived there for 3 years and I decided to study abroad. I was a business major and I wanted to do study abroad. And so all the other kids were going to like Europe, right? Most of the kids would go to like France or England.
Oh,
And
sure.
they had a new program in Thailand that we were going to be the first group of American students to go to Thailand. And I signed up for it because I'm like, oh, it looks interesting. This was before the internet was really, I mean, this was in the 90s, but Thailand was like, I was like, what? Taiwan? Thailand? What? Anyway, I got on the plane and I went with the first group of of American students to go to Thailand. I was professing, I had my dresses and everything, and I got on the plane, and my cousin went with me because he was jealous I was studying abroad in Thailand. He was a Wazoo student too, so he came also with the same group. He wasn't professing or anything. He was just a kid that I had a lot of cousins. He
Sure.
was one of my
Yeah,
cousins,
yeah.
but it was good to have him because he was 6 feet one, and we were both 21 years old. So I was 21. I was, like I said, I was a good kid. I had drank a few beers, but I was innocent. And I remember my grandpa told me, he's like, if you go to Thailand, I'm going to cut you off financially because my parents didn't have any money. So I had to work all the time as a dental assistant to pay for my room and board and the tuition. My grandpa started giving me money for school. He cut me off. He's like, if you go to Thailand, you're going to get AIDS.
Oh, oh my gosh.
Yeah. He's like, because the AIDS epidemic was like bad and stuff like that in Asia. And he had read about it in the Reader's Digest that Thailand had a really bad AIDS problem and HIV positive and AIDS, whatever. He's like, if you go to Thailand, you're going to get AIDS. I'm going to cut you off. So he was giving me like $10,000 a year for college and he cut me off. Like as
Wow.
soon as I signed up for the study abroad, he gave me no money. So I took out student loans to go to Thailand. Anyway, so when I got to Thailand, they put us with a host family. And we lived in a village near the border of Malaysia. It was a Muslim village.
Hmm.
And so they put me with a host family that lived in one of those Chinese shop houses. Like this was back in the 90s. This was like early 90s, right? There was elephants in the street. Like there would be a stoplight and there was an elephant with a guy on the elephant. And like it was really remote Thailand, like not Bangkok, not Chiang Mai, not, the big cities. It was like this little
Yeah.
village called Patani. And it was mostly Muslims. So my host mom was a dentist and she was a Muslim. And my host dad was a Buddhist and he was a dentist too. But and so I lived in a Chinese shop house. So we would sleep upstairs and then the downstairs was a pharmacy. And so we had two girls that lived with us that were single Thai girls, and the parents slept in the bedroom with their kids. They had two daughters. And then two of the girls, one was Buddhist and one was Muslim. They would sleep on the floor in the TV room. And then I would sleep in the kids' room on a bunk bed with another exchange student, another girl that was an exchange student from Iceland. And every day when I started living there, the other girl had been there like 6 months. She's like, when you see the father, because he's Buddhist, you have to say Sawat Vika, which is a sign of respect to him because he's a Buddhist and he was the father, right? And the mother
Hmm.
had to do this too, also, but she was Muslim, so she didn't really care about like I didn't have to bow to her because she was Muslim. And it was very interesting because they were unusual for Thailand because in Thailand they kind of keep separately. Like the Muslims have their own
Hmm. Right.
families, the Buddhists, they go to the temples and stuff, but they're not married usually. But these were educated people; they were married together. So that was my host family, and next door to our house was a karaoke bar with prostitutes. So every night around 5 o'clock, the prostitutes would come out of the bar and sit in front of the bar and wait for the customers. Oh, come in, have a sing. And then the
Right.
customers, the Thai men would go to prostitutes all the time. That was part of the culture. So the prostitutes would come out and sit in front of our next door. And so here I am, a 2 by 2 kid, right? I was a good girl. Like I was a nice girl. I wasn't going to get AIDS or anything like that. And I lived with a Chinese Buddhist guy who was Thai, and his wife was a Chinese Muslim, Buddhist Thai Muslim, and I was next to a brothel.
An eye-opening
So
experience.
I'm like, okay, I had my Bible with me, but I'm like, there's no workers here, right?
Yeah.
There's no church here. Even in the village, there was no church. I don't even think there was like any churches like Christian churches. And you could hear like the Muslims had the predominance. So the bell would ring. Like I don't even like I've worked with Muslims since then. They pray like 5 times a day. So the bell would go off at like 5 a.m. I don't even know what time it was. It was really
Yeah.
early. And
Right.
then every like 4 hours, the bell would ring, and then they would all go to the temple. They would all go to the mosque, and there was all these mosques all over. So as part of the study abroad program, we went to school at the University of Songkla, Patani. So it was a Buddhist campus, all Thai people. They taught us the language, but they made us go visit the temples and visit the mosque. So when we got to the mosque, they wouldn't let me in because I was a female.
Mm.
So if you're Muslim, women aren't allowed in the mosque, at least at this place. I couldn't step foot in the mosque. So there was like 5 of us female students. We couldn't go in, but the boys could. There was like 10 of us. I think the 5 guys could go in. Then they would take us to the Buddhist temples, and we would have to take our shoes off, and we'd have to wear long sleeves and long dress to go into the Buddhist temple. Even if you go to Thailand now, you have to do that. You have to put on something modest. You can't show your chest or your arm or whatever. And I
Hmm.
was like, okay, so I'm not the only religion in the world that we have to wear a dress or do something, right? And then the Muslims there, they had two different kinds. They had the kind where they wore like the full burqa with like the little um, the screen here.
Right.
So I would ride the taxi to go to class every day, and I would get on the taxi. It's called a tuk tuk. I would get on the back of this. It's like a truck with two seats. I would
Yeah.
sit on the back of the taxi, and the Iceland girl had told me, she's like, "Don't show your knees because the Muslims, it's offensive." So I kind of knew from growing up two by two, it was kind of modesty was a big deal. So I did the rules and everything, but I would ride on the back of the taxi with the Muslim ladies with the hijab. I mean the whatever the burqa. They call it a burqa.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you couldn't even see their face. And then there would be some Buddhist girls. It was crazy. And my mother, my host mom, she's like, yeah, next door is the prostitute. She spoke English, and she's like, about 50% of them have AIDS. She's like, tell your boy students not to go to the karaoke bars and have sex with the prostitutes because they could get AIDS. And so out of the five boys that were in our group, they were all like 20, 21. Only one went with prostitutes, and he wore condoms. But my cousin and all the other boys, they didn't go to the hookers. I mean, they were American kids, so they weren't used to going with prostitutes anyway.
Yeah.
A
Right.
big deal, but I'm just saying that's that. And so when I was there, I didn't really worry about the two by two too much because there was no workers there. But I did start to deconstruct at that time because I'm like, how is it that you can only go to heaven if you hear the gospel through a worker, and you can only go to heaven if there's a worker in your village, and what you know what like you have to hear it through the workers. And I'm like, there's a
Right.
million, and I'm here in this village of like 20,000 people. There's no workers here. So all these people are
Yeah.
going to hell because they didn't meet a worker. I studied Buddhism, and like I learned about Buddhism, and like I didn't mind it. Like I didn't. I thought a lot of the stuff that they taught in Buddhism was good, like not to want stuff because it just causes suffering. The more you want or you covet things, the more you suffer. So I learned about I think it was the five tenets of Buddhism. Anyway, it was part of our classes, and we had to learn about the Muslim religion as well. So that was kind of interesting. And that was kind of part of my deconstruction because I was like, okay, there's prostitutes next door. They all have AIDS, or half of them have AIDS. I am the only person going to heaven because I met the workers in Moses Lake, Washington.
When you say it like that, it
I'm
sounds
like,
pretty silly.
I know. And so then one of the other girls is like, okay, after we're done in Thailand, let's travel. So we bought tickets. I took a bus from Thailand to Malaysia to Singapore, and then back from Singapore back to Thailand. And like Singapore is all Chinese. We stay there. And when you go through Malaysia on a bus, everybody in Malaysia, it's Muslim Malays, it's Indians from India that came there for whatever reason. So they have their Hindu, and then
Hmm.
it's Chinese. That's the three cultures in Malaysia. So they're all going to hell too. Like I went to Malaysia 5 times while I was living near the border. Anyway, okay. So then to jump back on the two by two bandwagon. When I was 12, some of the friends from Moses like went to the Philippines to visit the workers. So the Philippines is a U.S. I mean, it's an English speaking country with some U.S. influence from World War II.
Hmm.
That's a long story short. But the workers started going to the Philippines like before World War II. And during World War II, some of the ministers were held captive
Hmm.
by I think it was by the Japanese or whatever. I forgot. Anyway, the workers have been in the Philippines since the 1940s at least, right? They speak
Yeah.
English, so it was an easy religion. It was easy to move the two by two religion to the Philippines because it's an English speaking country with U.S. influence, right? So when I was 12, a couple from Moses Lake, a professing couple, went to the Philippines to travel around, and they also went to Korea to travel around. While they were in a village in the Philippines, they got back in the early 80s, having a pen pal was like kind of a trend.
Yeah. Right.
And they had gotten these addresses from these young kids at a local school in a village in Mindanao, which is a southern island in the Philippines. So when they came back to Moses Lake, the husband was the elder for Wednesday night meeting. He gave me the address of a young girl who was not a two by two kid, but just a regular girl that he met in the village that they met. They got the address of this girl named Lumi. Um, and when I was 12, I started writing letters as a pen pal to the Philippines. Some girl, she wasn't a professing girl.
Yeah.
We wrote letters for 10 years, 12 years. And so when I
Oh,
lived in,
wow.
yeah. So, and I had never seen her in real life. I had just wrote letters to her for during the 80s and the 90s since I was 12. So when I was So by the time the mid 90s came around, I was in the Philippines. I was in Thailand. So I had wrote the workers in the Philippines, oh, I want to go to the Philippines to find my pen pal. Can I come visit you? And so back in the day, like even now, like if you're friends with the truth people, it's like a big old traveling friends. If you go to any country, you can go to their house. And that's
Right.
beautiful. I think that's cool. I mean, I think it's a beautiful thing about it. But on the same time, it's like you have a built in free lodging, right?
Yeah, right.
So I was kind of naive or whatever, but so the worker said, okay, yeah. So after I traveled around to the Singapore and I was done with my study abroad in Thailand, I had gold rings. Here's one of them. I had, my hair was kind of short because it had gotten damaged from the sun and it was like down to here. I was really tan. I had shorts, jeans, t-shirts. Like I had lived in Thailand for 6 months or whatever,
Mm,
5 months,
hmm.
5 or 6 months. And I was really tan, really skinny, really gold necklet. Like the gold is really cheap in Thailand. So I had bought gold jewelry. I didn't look professing. Let's just put it that way. I was like
Sure.
kind of like a beach girl, right? And I had just traveled through all these Asian countries. I was like, whatever. So I had reached out to the workers. I'm a professing girl in Thailand. I'm going to come see you guys. And so they're like, yeah, come to the batch. So I flew to Manila by myself when I was 21. And I met the worker there. Her name was Nadine Throgmorton. She was in her like around 60. She was the professing American worker there for many years. And she spoke the language. She picked me up at the airport and I spent like 3 or 4 days in the batch with them in Manila. So it was like this American worker and her partner and her companion was this Filipino lady. They were really nice to me. I stayed in the batch. They gave me her room. One of the girls had, they each had their own bedroom and she let me sleep in her bedroom,
Hmm.
the Filipino companion. And they invited all the young people that were Filipino to come over to the batch to visit because American girl from the truth was visiting.
Right,
so,
right.
so I had all these rings and I had shorts. The worker said, oh, do you mind changing into one of your dresses while the kids come visit you? Because they, you know, I'm like, what? And she's like, can you change into a skirt when they come? Because my shorts were long, modest shorts, right? But they were
Yeah.
kind of baggy shorts, like the jean shorts from the 90s. She's like, can you change into a skirt when the kids come to visit? Because they're coming to the workers' badge, which is like their apartment. So they brought all these kids in to visit me, all these professing Filipino kids to visit me because I was like this young
Yeah,
American
it was
person.
like a bit of a celebrity.
Yeah, but they asked me to change my clothes. Like I had to change to receive the
Right.
visitors, and I was like, okay, whatever. I didn't care. Like I was over the dress code by then because I was already
Yeah.
20. No, maybe I was almost 20. Maybe I was 22. I was like, okay, I'll wear the skirt, no problem. They were really sweet. So I spent like 3 or 4 days with the workers in their batch, and then there was. I'm like, I want to find my pen pal who was like just a worldly person down in the village. So there was a worker named Alma, a Filipino lady, and she was 28 years old. And they're like, what we'll have you do? They were very nice to me. The workers were. They're like, what we'll have you do is we'll have you fly with the worker to that island in the Philippines. It's not a safe place to go. It's called Mindanao. It's where they have a lot of kidnappings, especially back in the
Okay.
90s. So
Hmm.
they took it serious. Here was this American professing girl. They were going to help me find my pen pal, but they made me do what they said because it was not safe apparently. So they had me go with Alma, this worker who was 28. They had me go with her on the flight all the way down to the island. It was like a 2 hour flight. So I flew with her to this other city called Davao City, and then I had to stay with her in the friends' homes as her kind of like her companion. I had to sleep
Mm.
with her in the bed or in the bed. We had to share a bed, or I slept on the other twin, depending on who's out. We went to their homes, so I was with the friends in their homes. They had no running water. Some had no electricity, but most of the homes we stayed in had like they had an electric light bulb, but no electricity, but just the light bulb. And then we
Right.
slept under mosquito nets, and we would sing out of the Filipino hymn book, and they would have like the same format as regular meetings and stuff. The only thing they asked me to do was take off my rings and wear my dresses. I stayed in the homes of 4 different professing families, and it was kind of sweet. They were really nice. I thought it was nice, but it was just like because I was with a worker, they would roll out the red carpet. Their house was really
Mm.
clean. They would bring a lot of food, kind of like a celebrity, right?
Yeah.
And I found my pen pal, and she was Jehovah Witness. But the workers helped me find my pen pal, you know. And so, but they wouldn't let me stay with her or leave their site. I had to stay with them in there with the friends.
Jehovah's Witness have much of like a foothold in the Philippines at that
Yeah,
time?
yeah. So my best friend in high school was a Jehovah Witness, and they called themselves the Truth, which I didn't
Right.
talk about that. But when I was like in like ninth or 10th grade, I remember going to a Jehovah Witness convention with my best friend. She was a Mexican girl, and her whole family was JW, and they call themselves the Truth. And
Yeah, and they have
they're,
meetings too, right?
yeah, they're the only way too. Like they don't make you wear certain clothes. You can cut your hair, wear makeup, and have a TV, go to the movies. You can drink beer and have alcohol, but you can't. But they're the only one true way for them.
Right,
So
right.
and they'll just fellowship you if you do something wrong. That's a whole
Yeah.
different thing. The workers were really nice, and so I have nothing bad to say about the friends in the Philippines. So I went back to Manila after I found my pen pal. She was living in a dirt hut with 4 babies, and it was I've never seen such
Wow.
poverty in my life. And she was Jehovah Witness, and oh my God! And I went back like 3 times to visit her. So some of the friends that I had made that were part of the Truth Church, I had made that visit. I saw them again years later. Um, and like one of the friends that I met when I was in my early 20s, she died like 5 years ago, and her son and I are still friends. Like his mom died, she got ran over by a bus in that village. So like
Oh, wow.
I sent flowers to her funeral. I called the lady that I knew in the Philippines my pen pal. She died a couple years ago, but I called her and said, "Can I order flowers through you, and I'll send you the money to send flowers to this professing lady's house that died. She got ran over by a bus." But the reason I sent flowers to her is because my second visit to the Philippines, I got sick from dysentery and I ended up in the hospital and I almost died. And the professing lady is the one that found me and took me to the hospital. I would be dead if it wasn't for her.
Oh my gosh.
I was
That
in a,
I've heard what dysentery is like, and it's a horrific illness.
I drank well water, and it
Hmm.
had something in it. And I was in the hospital and I couldn't see. I was severely
Wow.
dehydrated. I couldn't see anymore because I didn't have any water in my body. And she took me to, it was when I couldn't see anymore. She took me to the hospital in the village. And it was like, I was in a room with a bunch of Muslim people because it was in the Muslim part of the Philippines, the southern Philippines. And
Hmm.
it was just a bunch of beds. And some of the friends came to visit me because I was still professing at the time. And I was like laying in this bed, like hooked up to IV. There's some stories in there but that's another story for another time. It's like,
Wow.
um, but so yeah, so I went to the Philippines and I came back to the workers batch in the Manila, and I asked Nadine. So I had to stay with her a couple more days because my ticket wasn't going to fly out until a certain date. So I remember asking her because when you were in the truth, like they would say, like if you died, say you weren't going to meetings for a couple of weeks, and if you died, you'd go to hell. You weren't saved. You would just like if you were doing bad that week and you died, you could go to hell. And then if you were
Hmm.
doing good and you were close to God another day and you died that day, you would go to heaven. You know what I'm talking about? Like your
Yeah.
salvation was kind of
It's
depending on the
it's
day.
always on a roller coaster. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I had a lot of anxiety about that. So I asked her because she would take me with her to go visit the friends that were like people that were old that lived in their little huts. We would go visit them, and we would take. It was in Manila, which is like a city of like millions of people, and we would sit in the back of taxis and buses, and we both have our dresses on, our Bible bags. And I asked her, I'm like, why is it that like if I have a bad day, I'm going to hell, but the next day I might have a good day and I'm going to go to heaven? I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Can you explain that to me? She's like, well, that's not exactly how it works. She's like, I think God will look at how you were in general, and then he'll base it on that. So I was like, well, if I'm good 15 days out of the month and I die on one of those 15 days, I'll go to heaven, and maybe God will look at the good 15 days. And if I die on a bad day, maybe I'll go to hell.
he's,
Like it didn't really
he's
give me a
sitting
lot.
there with a calculator and dividing by the number of years.
It just was confusing. So I was like, okay, whatever. And they were really nice to me, but I was just like, Nadine is still a worker, I think. I don't even know. But she believed in what she was doing.
Yeah.
They believed in what they were doing. They believed they were the one true way. They were sincere. Like we went to see another lady that had been run over by a bus and she only had one leg left, this older Filipino lady. And we walked in to give a Bible study for her just because she couldn't get to a meeting because she was like only with one leg. She cried and cried and cried in front of Nadine, and she cried. And I'm like, what is she saying? She's like, she's very thankful she met the workers because after she got run over by a bus, nobody would come visit her but the workers. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So like you
Hmm.
have these poor people that they live on like $200 a month, and they give their last dime to the workers, and they're just so thankful because they found the truth, the one true way, and they would cry. So they're very sincere, like they believe it. But at the same time,
Yeah.
all those years in the Philippines, that one guy was in charge. The overseer was a predator, and I met him when I was there.
Yeah. John Maston, right?
Yeah, I met him. He came over to the. I had to go meet with him, and I met all the workers in Manila. We had to go meet them a couple times, and I would go everywhere with the workers. They'd take me with them
Hmm.
everywhere. So I met John. I met all the Filipino workers in Manila at that time. they all knew me. Like it was like I was like one of them,
Right, right.
Couldn't wear my gold rings and I always had to wear the dress. But I mean, I met with them several times and like, who knows? It's just a weird religion. I mean, it was just a weird experience. So I came back to the United States. I had already signed up to do another study abroad in Thailand. I was going to graduate from college and I was going to do my internship at a 5-star hotel in Phuket, Thailand, which is kind of like the Hawaii of Thailand. It's a beautiful property. Like it was like 5-star resort on the beach in Thailand. It was gorgeous. So I dressed up every day and there was no meetings there. There was no workers on the island. There was no meetings. I had my Bible with me, but I didn't go to meetings for like the whole time. And I was working in a 5-star hotel. There was a movie crew that came in to film a movie when I was there. Young Indiana Jones. It was like Lucasfilm, and they saw me. I was 23 or 24 years old. They saw me and asked me to be in the movie. So they hired me to be a double for the actress. And I was a double for the actress and I was also an extra in a couple other films because they would always stay at our hotel to film because Thailand's a big place for people to come in from like Hollywood or whatever to film.
Right,
So
right.
I was in a couple movies as an extra and a double. And then, so I got to meet with the film crew. I was with the directors. I got to see like the whole Hollywood thing. And, they put makeup on me. And I remember the makeup, I was very conservative because I was a 2x2 and they would take me into the costume room. Like when I was an extra, they wanted me to dress sexy in the costume. Like you need to put this on. And she dressed me in like a top with your boobs hanging out. Like, and I was just like,
Yeah,
no, I look like a prostitute. She's like, girl, you're in Hollywood now. We're gonna, and so like, it was kind of fun. Like I was like, okay, wow, they did your makeup.
yeah.
So I got to experience like different things, but at the same time, I was like, well, I'm going to hell because I drink beer and I cut my hair. But at the same time, we had another hotel in the town called Phuket Town. So we had the resort on the beach, right? And I worked in the marketing department. And then we had another hotel in the city. And you would walk in and pay. The guests would come in, like the European guests or the Thai people, whatever, the Chinese, all the guests from around the world. You'd pay. And then next door was like a room. And you could go into the room and it was a brothel. So sometimes they would send me to the hotel in town to pick up the papers for the marketing department or whatever. They would shuttle me over there to pick up stuff. And I would go, one day I went into that room. I was like, what is this dark room that these people go in? I walked in. It was a dark room with a glass wall. And the girls there was a glass wall with like 8 or 10 Thai girls behind glass. And they all had numbers on them in their bikinis. So when you walk in, the girls would line up behind the glass and you could pick the girl you wanted. It was a prostitute. You could pick the girl you wanted and you could pay and she would go upstairs and have sex with you or whatever, massage.
Wow.
And so that was part of the service of the hotel. Now it wasn't in the resort because the resort was primarily for like Western European people, but the
Hmm.
hotel was for like Chinese or also Western people, but it was more Asian style, right?
Hmm.
And I'm just sitting there going, okay, I'm a professing 2x2 girl, and I'm sitting in here, and there's like 10 girls behind glass with numbers on them, and they're being sold for sex every night. Like I was like, okay, I can't. And this is my boss, the guy that owned the hotel. That was his business.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Yeah, wow, that's quite a shock.
I was like, okay, all right. This was like, but I'm going to hell if I cut my hair and celebrate Christmas. Okay, okay, got it. Like this is where the deconstruction started. And
Yeah.
then I started going. Then part of the thing was we would take the tourists to Patong Beach, which was the red light district. So I would go into the bars with some of the kids from the resort. We had other kids that worked there that were European, like me, interns or whatever. It was like there would be a stage with like naked girls or boys, naked boy, like boys in G strings with numbers on them. Like it was the prostitution and the sex trade was huge, especially it still is there, but it was really bad in the 90s. Like the
Hmm.
drugs, the sex, and then as part of my job as a marketing internship, I had to read the newspaper. There was two newspapers, the Bangkok Post and the Nation in English. And I still have clippings from the newspapers. So my job was to clip out all the articles about tourism and then show them to the owner of the resort because I had to like kind of read it for him. So he would just only read the articles about the tourism because he was really busy. One of the articles was, okay, last night there was a fire at this hotel downtown Phuket. They found 8 charred bodies of girls chained to the bed. They were 12 to
Oh my
14 years
gosh.
old. They were chained to the bed with a chain because they were forced into prostitution. And at night, so they wouldn't run away, they were chained to the beds. And then a fire broke out in the building and they couldn't get it out because they were chained to the iron bed and they all burned to death. They were all sex trafficked into Phuket to service the customers, mostly tourists. And I cut the article out and I was just like, okay, but I'm going to hell for if I want to celebrate Christmas, or I cut my hair, or I don't go to meeting. And I was just like, I couldn't. And the reason I remember this also because it was vivid, but I kept a diary, right? It was all these stories. I was like, okay, so I'm going to hell for cutting my hair, for leaving meetings, for not going to meetings because there's no meeting here. I'm going to go to hell and burn in all eternity with the devil and all of his people. But you can chain kids to beds. Like, I don't know. But they're going to go to hell too. They didn't meet the workers. I don't know. I just couldn't do it. Like, I couldn't do it. I couldn't, it didn't make any sense, you know?
Hmm.
And so I left Thailand, um, kind of really confused about religion in general. Like, that was a Buddhist religion, which teaches like peace and long suffering and giving up all your needs, like the sex thing. Like, if you're a Buddhist monk, you can't have sex. But
Right.
yet at the same time, their culture, they're chaining their daughters to beds and selling their daughters for $100 and chaining them to a bed for the tourists to have sex with. I just, whatever. It was crazy. I was just like, and then then old men would come to the resort and they'd hire these 12-year-old boys. So they'd be walking around the resort. They're like these German guys with like 12-year-old boys. And they were allowed to walk around the pool and order drinks, and their 12-year-old boy was sitting there, and they would, the sex trafficking and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
I was just like, okay, but I'm going to go to hell for cutting my hair and not going to meeting. What kind of God is that? That's when I started that's where the religion was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
I can't.
I can. It sounds like the cognitive dissonance was just building
Is that what
greater
you
and
call it?
greater.
See, I didn't know what that word meant. Like, I was never,
Yeah.
I was just an average B student, but I was being exposed to all this like global culture stuff, you know?
Yeah.
How am I going to go? Why am I going to hell? Like, I already knew I was going to hell. I mean, I was still like really chaste and I didn't do anything with men or whatever, but I would drink beer and I would party a little bit and I was wearing jeans and my hair was, I wore makeup, not a lot,
Hmm.
but I was going to hell. I don't know. And so anyway, I came back from there and, you know, it was a great experience, super fun. Thailand's an amazing country. I learned to speak Thai. I can still speak Thai to this day. And I went to an orphanage in Thailand where all these prostitutes have these babies that they can't take care of. Um, this part is tough. This is where people that know me, they know this story. So I was 24 or 23, 24. I went to a orphanage. I would come into these orphanages just to visit for like a couple minutes, and it was really sad. And I said, you know, when I'm older, I'll take one of those kids, you know. And um I asked an attorney there at one point. I'm like, can I adopt one of these kids? And he's like, no, you can't. Why would you do that? You can have your own babies. And I'm like, he's like, and then I looked into it. You couldn't adopt kids if you were single from Thailand. It was just not.
Oh,
It wasn't a thing.
sure.
But to make a long story short, in 2007 or 2006, we adopted a Thai orphan, my husband and I. Fast forward 20 years, I adopted a baby from Thailand from an orphanage. And guess
Wow.
what? Guess what? I knew, like, I had to talk, like, my husband was just some guy I married from LA. He didn't know me in my story about Thailand. That
Hmm.
was a dream I had, right? So, no, fast forward like 10 years later, I actually adopted a baby from Thailand. And I knew they didn't tell me her story until they give you the paperwork and everything. I
Hmm.
knew her story would be that story, right? And so when I got the paperwork on the baby, when they gave me the dossier, whatever they call it, to adopt, this is your child. If you're interested, you can take this one. The orphanage sends you the paperwork. Her mom was just like that story. So
Yeah.
I have a 21-year-old daughter now, and from Thailand. I raised a little girl from Thailand since the age of 2 years old, and she was an orphanage for that exact story that I was talking about. Her
Hmm.
mom had HIV positive, and she passed away. Out of like that sad story, I was able to. I had that idea, and I now 20 years later, I have a 21-year-old Thai daughter.
I'm so glad that you were able to bring that full circle.
Yeah, I had to wait till I got married. I had to pay for it. I had to have a home, you know, all those things.
Yeah.
When I had the dream of doing it, I was just a kid traveling around, you know. Anyway, so after that, so I lived in Thailand at the resort and I saw this crazy stuff, but I had a great time. It was a beautiful country, beautiful people, lots of culture, amazing food. I did a double major at Wazoo and I was a double major for international business and communications. So I won a scholarship for study abroad in Australia my last semester of college because I had two majors. So it took me like 5 years. When I got there, I had reached out to the friends and I'm like, oh, I'm the new girl from the truth and I'm here and everything like that. And they introduced me to some of the friends. I arrived in July and they, I got in touch with some of the friends and they were called the Thompson family and they had kids between the ages of maybe 8 and 19. They had 4 kids and they were the elders and they had a beautiful home. They were very wealthy people. The father was in business somehow and he had a lot of money and they had the overseer lived with them when he wasn't traveling around. So the
No.
overseer was
Okay.
some guy named Evan Jones, I think, something like that. I wrote it down, but I forgot his name. But anyway, when the first time they invited me to their home, they said, well, the worker's out of town this weekend. You can stay in he had his own guest quarters in their home.
Mhm.
Beautiful. So it was like a suite it was like a hotel suite, but it was in their home. So they
Yeah.
were very good professing people. Like the mom had her hair in a bun. They had beautiful food. The kids were all well behaved, and the daughter had her hair in long braid with a long skirt. Never said the F word. Really nice people. Really, really like the creme de la creme, right?
Yeah.
I got to sleep in his room every time they would invite me on the weekends to stay with them because I was a young girl from Washington State. I was a young American professing girl, and they had their kids. I was like the new girl in town, and they were really nice to me. And the first weekend they invited me was wintertime in Australia. So if you go to Australia in July, August, it's cold.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of here. So I wore jeans and I was 23 years old. I didn't, to me, as long as your hair was in a bun on Sunday, you're fine. I wore jeans to their house for the weekend. And they had the Sunday morning meeting in their house on Sunday, but I wore jeans and the father wasn't happy with me. I slept in the overseer's room at their house and they had so much money. I remember that they had like fine china for like the meals and stuff. And I remember asking the wife, I'm like, why do you have all this china? She's like, oh, we entertain a lot and we have like the open home and whatever. And I would help clear the table. And it was just like, whoa, like the gold plated, all the plates
Yeah.
on gold. And anyway, I never met Evan Jones or whatever. He was an old man at that time. He was probably like 80 years old, but their son was 19 years old, right? And his name was James, and he was a nice kid, a 19-year-old guy, professing guy. I would spend the weekends there, and he would confide in me. He's like, yeah, he's like, my dad's an elder. He's like, my dad manages the money for the church for the whole state of Victoria. Like Melbourne, Australia, is like in the state of Victoria. So he said they had like $400,000 in the bank account and the workers controlled the money and then his dad had the sign for all the money and it was in every state had thousands of dollars and his dad had a bank account for the workers with like $400,000, which is a lot of money. The Australian dollar was similar to the US dollar at that time. I forgot
Right.
exactly. It was like $500,000. And I was like, oh my God, I thought we were poor, like religion, right?
Mhm.
And so I was there for like 5 months. While I was there, every weekend, one of the professing families would invite me to their houses and they were all really nice to me. They asked me why I cut my hair. They asked me why I wore a gold ring. They asked me why I wore makeup. I didn't. I like even now I don't wear a lot of makeup, but they asked me why I wore foundation and mascara. But then I was like, why do you have a Christmas tree in your living room on Sunday morning meeting? Because in my home state, if you had a Christmas tree, that's worldly and you can go to hell. Like it's not
Right.
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 But they had Christmas trees in their Sunday morning meeting. Like there was the meeting, there's a big old tree, like whatever. I'm like, well, okay, whatever, you do you. I just didn't get it. And then I
Yeah.
went to convention in New Zealand, and they had to sit separately. So me and a professing girl I was friends with named Tracy came from Washington to travel around with me, and this is where it gets kind of dicey. We took a train from Melbourne, Australia, up to Cairns to go to the Great Barrier Reef. And we were on these trains for like 12 hours. It's like really,
Mm.
like Australia is a really big country. So to go from Sydney, Australia to the Cairns is like two big train rides that are overnight trains. So they stop along the way in like the cities and you can get books and candy and things like that. This was before people had like their iPad and everything. So I used to buy the Inquirer, the National Enquirer type garbage
Yeah.
magazines about the
Yeah.
celebrities. So like we stopped to get candy and like some snacks. So I bought the local magazine for for in the state of whatever, somewhere in Australia. It was called like the Star magazine or whatever.
Mhm.
And I bought some candy. And I got on the train, and we were in our little. We had a sleeping room for the train. Like the two girl, me and this other girl. She was a professing girl. We shared like a little booth, and they make the bed at night. And I opened the magazine. I had like three of them. One of them said something like 12-year-old girl commits suicide because doesn't want to go to church camp. Like that was the front page of the Star magazine.
Whoa.
It was like
Wow.
it was 12-year-old girl commits suicide and her brother commits suicide because they don't want to go to church camp or something like that.
Mhm.
Oh my God. My stomach, like, that sick feeling you get when some horrible news, but you don't know what
Mhm.
it is. Like, you only probably get that feeling like maybe 5 or 10 times in your whole life as an adult. I got this horrible sick feeling in my stomach. So I had already been to like, I had hung out with the professing people. I got used to them. They were really strict. They called me a prostitute because I had a long red coat. But for the most part, they were really nice people. But when I saw that newspaper article, my stomach dropped. I just knew these were professing kids.
Yeah.
And I had no way of knowing, but I just knew. My gut feeling was like, oh my God. I didn't sleep that night. I knew these were professing kids. I just knew it because in Australia, and I kind of started dating this kid that was a professing kid, kind of dated him, and they're very judgmental, very strict, very backwards, more than here. Like
Mhm.
compared to Washington State in the 90s, the professing people in Melbourne, Australia were like really nice to me, but they were very judgmental. They said behind my back, I had a long wool coat I had bought at Nordstrom's that I brought there because it was winter. They said I looked like a harlot because I wore a red coat. I mean, I had the
Good
dress on, the
grief.
nylons, but like I was a prostitute because I wore a red coat. Like you weren't allowed to wear red coats. It was, the whole thing was just stupid. Like it was very like backwards. They were very legalistic, way more legalistic than
Yeah.
USA. Like that was the main difference I noticed was like the dress code was really strict. What you could do was really strict. Um, when I was kind of dating this kid named Paul, like I got into his car the first time, he had some CDs in his car and he was trying to hide the CDs. He's like, oh, I'm not supposed to have CDs. The workers don't allow it. And I'm like, what? Like everybody has CDs in Washington State in the Truth Church. It's not a big deal to me.
Right.
I wasn't
Right.
offended, but he was trying to hide the CD. That's how backwards they were. So we went all the way up to the Cairns. We did the Great Barrier Reef. We went on a boat. We took buses and trains all the way back down to Sydney. We went to the Opera House. Then we went to New Zealand. We met the friends in New Zealand. We went to 2 conventions in New Zealand with some girls from the Truth Church. The whole time I traveled between between Australia and New Zealand, my stomach hurt the whole time, and I quit sleeping because I knew I had to leave the religion. And then I found out it was true. Like I think
Mhm.
I got back to Australia before I flew out to leave the country. The kid I was kind of dating, a kid named Paul, he was like 20. He told me some kid had committed suicide. So it was that girl, and her name was Narelle.
Yeah.
It was that girl, and you can Google it now, and it's true. And I knew it was a professing people. I just knew it, and I knew I had to leave the religion because kids were killing themselves over it. I didn't sleep for the rest of the time, and I came back to the U.S. and I had PTSD. I had PTSD. I didn't sleep for like a month or two, and I went back to Wazoo to graduate, and I had mental health problems, and I had severe anxiety. I went to the student health center. They put me on like anti-anxiety and whatever medical antidepressant. I got really depressed. I came home and I was just, my mom said I was like a basket case.
Yeah.
And so I graduated from Wazoo, and I went to work and see, I was depressed and had anxiety, but I went back to meeting and everything. And I went to work in Seattle for like a couple years. Um, but to make a long story short, I kind of didn't go to meeting as much. I tried to date that professing kid, but he told me, like, once again, he asked me to marry him, the one in Australia, and his parents were very wealthy, and he's like, "You'll have to wear dresses. We'll probably have a meeting. You'll have to wear your hair long, whatever." And I'm part of the community. I'm like, I don't want to be told what to do. I don't want to wear a certain outfit. I don't want to wear my hair in a bun. I don't want to do all this stuff. I want to travel. I want to be who I am. I want to work in
Right.
the fashion industry. I don't want to do this. And so that didn't work out. So I was in Seattle for a couple years working for a shoe company, and I decided I wanted to move to LA to work as a shoe designer. And I didn't have a degree in shoe design or anything, but I moved to LA by myself when I was in my late 20s, and I thought I'd give meeting one more time a chance. So I was assigned I was assigned to go to meeting at this guy's house named Jay Wilson in Torrance, California, who I went there like maybe 4 times. They were okay to me, kind of a weird family. Like him and his wife were there, and I met his mom, and they would take me to meetings sometimes. He was a little creepy. Turns out, I found out later that he has CSA allegations as well. So that was
Right.
my Sunday morning meeting. I only went like 4 times maybe, and then I stopped going. And I had severe anxiety because I just quit going. I just couldn't do it anymore. And so I didn't
Hmm.
go to church, but I knew I was going to go to hell because I left the 2 by 2 religion. So I was working as a shoe designer in Beverly Hills, and I would drive from my apartment in Hermosa Beach to Beverly Hills. It took about an hour. And I started going to counseling. And one day, I was having panic attack in the car because I was worried. I was all dressed up, I dressed very fashion. I was like in my late 20s. I was single. I was like, I worried I was going to go to hell if I got in a car accident because I didn't go to. I knew it wasn't the right church, but I was brainwashed, and I had
Yeah.
panic attacks. So I was having panic attacks and anxiety all the time. And I was working full time in the fashion industry, living on my own in LA. I didn't know anybody except a couple kids, my age. So I was on the freeway, and I had a panic attack in my car. And in LA, the freeways are just crazy. So I called my psychologist on my flip phone, and I'm like, Dr. Maloney, I'm having a panic attack. What do you want me to do? She's like, go to the ER, go to the nearest ER. Uh, you need to go be seen by a psychiatrist because this is not safe for you to be driving, and you could lose. I was on the 405 in traffic. It's a crazy, like a 10 million people city. So I drove to the nearest emergency room, and they asked me, like, they're like, what's wrong? Why are you here? And I said, my psychologist told me to come here because I feel like I feel like I want to jump off a cliff because my anxiety is like up to here. Like I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
suicidal, but I felt like I just wanted to die because my anxiety was so
Right.
bad. Like, just I couldn't do anything to get rid of it. It was horrible. And the medication I was on didn't work for it. And it was horrible. It was really bad. So they're like, we're going to bring up, I told them I felt like jumping out of my skin or jumping off a cliff, but I didn't mean it like that. So they brought a security guard to stand by my bed. And I'm like, I'm like, why are you here? And he's like, because they told me you're suicidal. I have to stand by your.
Oh, sure.
And I'm like, no, no, I'm not going to kill myself. I have to pee. He's like, no, you can't go pee because I have to be with you. And I'm like, no. I was wearing like a nice sweater and like high heels and everything. I'm like, no, I'm here because I had a panic attack on the freeway. I need to pee. He's like, okay, okay. And I went to pee and I came back to my bed, and he stood there the whole time. And finally, a psychiatrist came. It took like 8 hours, right? And she came to my bed in the ER, and she's like, well, you can go to a mental hospital downtown LA for like a couple days and just have an evaluation. She's like, it doesn't mean anything bad. It doesn't mean you're crazy. I had never been to a mental hospital. And she's like, just go. Maybe you can get some insight on what's going on. So, I was like, okay, my panic attacks are that bad. So I took they made you go in an ambulance. So I went to downtown LA to a mental hospital, and I arrived at like midnight. They took all your clothes off. They took away my phone, my clothes. I had my jewelry, my hair clip, whatever, and my shoes. They made me put on a hospital gown, and they put me in a bed with like 4 other people. Like in the room was 4 other girls, whatever, women. I cried so hard. I couldn't stop crying, like the kind where you're heaving. And I
Yeah.
went back
Right.
out to the nurse's station. I'm like, I'm crying so hard, I'm going to wake up the other girls in the room. Can I have my own room? She's like, okay, sure. You can have your own room. So she put me in my hospital gown. She put me in the room down the hall by myself. I couldn't sleep the whole night. I sat up in the bed and just looked out at the city. And I looked out, and I just sat there, and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. Like something's got to change. It was kind of like a wake up call. So
Mm-hmm.
the next day, my boyfriend at the time was my current husband. I kept calling him from the payphone. They wouldn't let me have my phone, but I called him from the payphone, and he wouldn't pick up because I'm like, I want him to come pick me up. And I was waiting to have. They wanted me to have an evaluation with the psychiatrist on duty before they would release me because I was so called suicidal because of whatever they put me in. But the guy was taking too long to get there because it was a Saturday. So I called my mom, who was professing. Okay, this is the interesting part. I called my mom from a payphone at a mental hospital, and I was like 28 years old, and I was living in LA for like a couple years already. And I called my mom, and she's like, she was in Moses Lake, and she still went to meeting. She had the bun and all that, devout 2 by 2, whatever. I'm like, hi, mom. She's like, where are you? I'm like, I'm in a mental hospital. She's like, oh, you are? And I started to cry. And she's like, why are you there? And I'm like, because of the religion the church you raised me in is why I'm here. I'm like, I left already. You know that, right? She's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, I had a panic attack on the freeway because I'm afraid I'm going to go to hell because of the church you raised me in.
Wow.
And I'm like, I'm in a fucking mental hospital because of the church you raised me in. And I started yelling on the phone and I was crying. I'm like, because of the church you raised me in. I'm in a mental hospital. And of course, I'd never been in a mental hospital. I'd never, everything. I was like, I had a full-time job as a shoe designer. I was making good money. I was living in my own apartment. I had my own car, whatever. I was successful. I had 2 degrees. I was on my own in LA. I made her cry. Guess what happened? I didn't know this. So I cried and told her, the way you raised me is why I'm here. And I'm like, the reason I'm in here is because of the anxiety is so severe that I think I'm going to go to hell. So I have panic attacks and I'm in the fucking mental hospital. And she cried and I cried. Then I had to hang up because they had one payphone for like the whole
Right.
hospital. And then, people in there were like wiping their feces on the walls. I was in the main hospital because it was Kaiser Permanente.
Oh,
They put all
jeez.
it's like a loony bin. Like they put all the mental health patients in the same ward. So like
Hmm.
I was with people that were really severely mentally ill and I was like just having panic attacks. So finally I got to meet the psychiatrist and I said, I'm not suicidal. I'm like, my religion brainwashed me. And he's like, yeah, you are religious trauma. And at that time, no one had ever heard of the word religious trauma because this was like the early 2000s, right?
Yeah. Right.
This was like,
Wow.
this was the early 2000s. And he's like, you need to he gave me like a pill for a benzodiazepine. And he's like, you need to go to a specialist who specializes in brainwashing for religion, like religious trauma. And I'm like, well, where are they located? And he's like, I know one in La Jolla, California, which is like 2 hours by car. I'm like, well, I'm living in LA, dude. I don't need to go to La Jolla, but do you have someone local? And he's like, no, but look it up when you get out of here. He's like, I'm going to release you to go home. You don't need to stay here, but it's called religious trauma. And that's what he's like, you need to unbrainwash yourself with therapy. So he gave me a prescription for a benzo to help me sleep. And then he released me and somehow I got a hold of my boyfriend at the time named Joe. Joe picked me up and took me home where I was living. But guess what? I found out. So that's what happened with the Truth Church. I never went back after that, and I spent one night in a mental hospital. Guess what? uh, I called my mom like a week later or a couple weeks later. Guess what? She got off the phone from me. She went over to my dad, and this is where it made me cry when I tell this story, but now I'm fine with it. She told my dad, they were both professing, they were in their late 50s at this time. She's like, Rod, if this church makes my kids go to a mental hospital, I don't want to go anymore. I'm done. And she told my dad, she's like, I don't care if I'm going to hell. I don't care if she's like, I don't care if I'm going to hell. I don't want to look ugly anymore. If this church is putting my kids in a mental hospital, I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. Like that. Like she was crying and she was like, I'm done. Just how like it makes me sad when I tell the story, but that was a catalyst. They quit going. That was a
Yeah.
catalyst. And so when I talked to her later about it, she's like, I couldn't bear the thought that this religion puts my daughter in a mental hospital. She's like, what kind of religion is that? Where it makes my kids go to a friggin' mental hospital. I'm done. I don't want it anymore. I'm done. I'm not doing it anymore. So they quit.
Wow.
This was like 2000, early 2000s. They quit. They were both in it for 25 years. And now my brother goes, yeah, because he'd never professed or anything. He had kids young and he was married and
Yeah.
stuff. He goes, we knew she never told my siblings what had happened about me being in the mental hospital because of the religion. She's like, my brother's like, yeah, we knew something had changed because all of a sudden she cut the bun off and they got a TV. Asked her later, even like 5 years ago, I'm like, was that really? She's like, yeah, I was done. She's like, when you called me from the mental hospital, I was done. I'm like, okay, well, I'm glad I could help. Like, I felt kind of bad, but that's why they quit. That's why they quit. And the other kid, I think my sister quit after that. I had a younger sister who's 5 years younger. She quit, and my older sister had quit before that. No one's left. No one. And you know what? They've never gone back to church ever. And this was over 20 years ago. They've never gone back to church.
Hmm.
They won't go. They won't go to a church. I think 25 years in the 2x2, they won't go to church. I mean, they'll go like if someone gets married or there's a funeral, but
Right.
they won't join a church. But that's my story. I mean, that's kind of it in a nutshell. I mean, there's more parts to it about like the anxiety and like how it affects me even now. But I'm a lot better. But
Wow. That story is. I mean, I'm glad you don't feel like you get emotional, but I was feeling emotional when you dropped that. Just I think maybe because there's so many parents that didn't make that choice for their kids. Going back to kind of that fear of hell, w is there a particular thing that kind of helped you get over that fear? Um, how did that work for you?
That's a tough question, but I'll tell you, in 27, I kind of always had that fear in the back of my mind, and I've been out for over 20 years. Um, but it kind of sucks because they kind of embed that in your brain, right? So even though
Very
I don't
much, yeah.
now because I don't believe I belong with Hitler, you know, in hell. What really helped me get over it as an adult was in 2017, I was hired by a company to go. Okay, I'll make it really quick. I was hired by an Israeli Palestinian company to go be the middleman between. So the Palestinian women make embroidery, and the Israeli women make uh, dresses. And so it was a peace building company in the fashion industry that was a nonprofit to build peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis. So in 2017, 9 years ago, I was hired to bring that brand into the United States and like help do the marketing. I was director of sales and marketing. So this guy hired me who was a retired psychologist who did peace talks between Palestinians and Israelis. So the first day of the job, they flew me to Tel Aviv, Israel. I'd never been to the Middle East before. And I went to Tel Aviv and I stayed the night. They put me up in an Airbnb in Jerusalem by myself. So I'm
Mhm,
here I am by myself. I'm an American woman in my I was over 40 years old. I had a daughter who was 10. I was married and I kind of went to church once in a while, but not really. But I had never been to Bethlehem or Jerusalem or any of those countries. And I didn't know much about the Jewish people, just like from the Jewish people that I had been friends with in Beverly Hills. And like my husband's best friends are Jewish because he's from LA. But, that's it. Oh my God. The first day, I had to go into the West Bank and I had to sit down with the Palestinian. They had a peace talk between Palestinian men and Israeli men, and they had a translator that was a Palestinian and a translator that was Israeli, and they were arguing about the peace in the Middle East in the West Bank. And I'm sitting there, and my boss was a 72-year-old retired psychologist from the United States. And his goal in life was to build this peace company between the two sides. He hired me, but I had to go to these peace talks with the men to learn about the problem in the Middle East and all this stuff like that. I didn't know anything about the Middle East. I knew about Gaza and stuff, but I didn't know anything. So I got a fast education in like the problems between the Israelis and the Palestinians in general. Like, there's
mhm.
a lot of problems, but at this time in 2017, they were getting along. So so they introduced me to the staff. There was 20 Muslim women that were from the West Bank. They speak Arabic. One of them spoke English. She was assigned to me to be my driver and my translator. Her name's Adim. She's Muslim. She wears a hijab and she's married to her cousin and they have 4 kids.
Oh, wow.
And my other girl that I worked with was a lady in her 50s. She was a Jew. She doesn't like to fight, so she's into the peace building. My boss was a Buddhist retired psychologist from Boise, Idaho. And I'm like this, like, you know, I guess Christian, whatever person from America. And it was like, oh, crazy. So cool though. So I stayed in Jerusalem by myself. And the owner's wife, Paula, she's 72 years old. She's like, you know what? While you're here, you need to go to Old Jerusalem and go to the Christian quarters. And I was like, oh, that makes me nervous because I'm supposed to be Christian, but I there's all these Christians that go to Bethlehem to visit Bethlehem. And so my friend Adim, the Palestinian is Arabic Muslim lady, she's like, "Do you want to go to the Bethlehem church, the Jesus church?" So Jesus was born in Bethlehem, and he's a real person that lived in the U.S. In the history of that area.
Mhm.
Jesus is a real person. Like they have a whole church dedicated to him that they built 300 years after he was born, and it's in Bethlehem. So I'm like, there was a big line of devout Christians that came from like Europe that were on a bus, and they line up because Bethlehem's a big tourist trap. So the Jesus
Right.
church here, and there's a big line that goes outside of the church, like this Christian, a lot Christian Orthodox and like really strict Christian, different churches. The people that run the churches for the tourists are all Muslims. Okay,
Oh, sure.
if you're Jewish, if you're from Israel, you don't go to Bethlehem. You don't go into Bethlehem because it's in the Palestinian side.
Okay.
Bethlehem is in Palestine, basically. So the Jesus Church for the tourists is ran by Muslim Palestinians. So the Muslim girl, my friend that's Muslim, she has a hijab. She starts walking in the back door to bring me in to the church. She's like, "Do you want to visit the Jesus Church?" I'm like, "I don't want to stand in line. It's like a big line. It's like a mile long, and it was super hot out because I was there in May." She's like, "Don't worry. Let's just go in." And I'm like, "What?" And she came in the back door and they started yelling because I saw my hair and I was wearing jeans and a shirt. They started yelling at her in Arabic. "She has to get in line." You know what the girl told? She's like, she yelled at them in Arabic. She's like, "This is my sister-in-law. She's going to go in. She wants to see the Jesus Church. She can go in." And the Muslim guy said, "Okay, okay, no problem. Your sister-in-law." So I went in the back of the Jesus Church and I got into the Jesus Church. And what they have is like the sanctuary where they think the manger was, is like this light. There's a light on it, and there's like the people that come in, the Orthodox Christians, the really religious Christian, devout Christian, like really devout, like the ones that
Hmm.
pray and do all this stuff. They lay their stuff on this like part of this floor where Jesus' manger supposedly was, and they pray, they kiss the ground and stuff. They brought me in the back way, like they let the line stop just for me because I was with a Muslim, and she said, the guy at the church, you know what he said to me? He's like, "Do you want to kiss the ground where Jesus was? Because you're Christian, right?" And I just looked at him and I looked at the ground and I'm like, "No, I'm not going to kiss the ground where Jesus was." And he's like, "Do you want him to bless your stuff?" Because I had like a backpack with all my stuff. He's like, "You can put your purse here and then blessing." That's what they do. They do a blessings like the other Christian, like the Orthodox Christian.
Right.
And I was like, "No, I don't want to do that." I'm like, "No, no, that's okay. That's okay. I'm fine. I just want to see like the inside of the church. I don't want to get a blessing from like where the manger was or whatever." It was too like, what do you call it? Like too religious. I got like a private tour of the whole church by this like guy that worked there that was a Muslim. And then I left and I walked out of the church and I'm like, "Okay, I just got like a back door entry to this it's the most religious Christian place in the world, the Jesus Church. I forgot what it's called. It's like I took pictures of it. It's like this devout Christian place. It's like people that are Christian, they want, this is their dream to go there.
Yeah. It's
I don't know
like
what
their mecca essentially.
yeah. I felt nothing. I felt
Mm.
nothing because even though I believe in God, I believe in Jesus. I don't believe in like I don't need to be religious about it. I felt nothing, right? I didn't feel religious about it. I thought it was a cool cultural experience, but I felt
Hmm.
nothing. And then the next day, the owner's wife gave me a tour of Old Jerusalem and I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to feel bad because it's like, it's Christian and I don't feel very religious while I'm visiting." But it was weird. You walk in and so I'm a Christian, right? Like supposedly religious belief Christian. But I felt guilty for not feeling anything because I walked in and it was like the really, really religious Christian group. Then you walk another few feet and you go to the Muslim section of the Old Jerusalem, and it's a bunch of Muslims that go to Mecca and they have their wives have the hijab. And then you go to the next section, it's the Jewish section where they have the thing on their forehead and they have, they're very devout, like Orthodox Jewish, which I know
Yeah.
a lot about now because I've had a lot of bosses that are Orthodox Jewish. And then the other section is Armenian Christian or Orthodox Christian, whatever, something like that. And I'm just like, it's just religion to me. And so, anyway, I worked in the Middle East for 5 years and I worked with these women. I would go into the West Bank in the Palestinian villages where they've already, anyway, so I went into the Palestinian villages and I would sit with the Muslim women. They all have like 5 or 10 kids and they are just like you and I. They want their kids to be happy. They want their kids to get an education. They love their husbands. Um, they care about their children's education. So we would give them work. They loved us because we would have them do the embroidery, which is Palestinian embroidery. And then I would design the products like the handbags, the clothing. And then the clothes were made in Israel or Gaza, depending on what it was. And so I would go back and forth between the West Bank and Israel, right? And then I was there several times and back and forth. And I'm the only American Christian. Everybody was Jewish or Muslim, right? And
Hmm.
I love these women. I love them. Like I love them. And it was a peace building company. And then they closed the company during COVID because we couldn't get the stuff between the two sides. And then the and this is where my fear of hell kind of went away. This is where my fear of hell kind of went away. Many years ago, I met a Jewish guy. I told him about my fear of hell, and he said, "Tara, um, hell is already here. It's here, right?" And I was in Beverly Hills when he told me that because I was working in the fashion industry and there's a lot of Jewish people in the fashion industry. He's like, "It's already here. You don't have to fear hell. It's already here amongst us." And I'm like, "Okay." But then I quit working for this peace building company. We kind of closed it down, and then the war broke out. And then I was friends with everybody still on WhatsApp. We talked back and forth. One of the families that I went to their house, one of the Muslim families I was close to that were part of this whole like peace building organization. 13 of their family members were crushed like the first week of the Gaza war because they lived in Gaza and like all the homes are cement blocks.
Mm-hmm.
And every time a bomb would come from Israel, it would like crush. The whole family was smushed just like ants, like 13 people, like the mom and dad, the grandma, the kids, just like that, because the cement blocks, they fall, right? They were all
Yeah.
crushed. And then Gaza, and some of my staff, like I was in charge of the ladies that would do the embroidery in the middle, in the West Bank. Some of them were, one of the villages was plundered by the Israeli army, and they killed a bunch of people that I know from my work there. And then what happened to the Jewish people on October, I think it was October 7th, where they
Mm-hmm.
would like kill like the Hamas, they killed a bunch.
Yeah.
It was horrible, like hell. And so it just broke my spirit. Like people I knew were killed, and I hate
Mm-hmm.
reading the news about it, and it's horrible. And the guy that started the company, he died like a week and a half ago. Um,
Hmm.
the old man that started the company, he was in his 80s. He just died a couple weeks ago of cancer. And my fear of hell kind of left after, if I just kind of gave up on it, because there's already hell here right now. The eternal torture, there's already torture here. People torture each other. Like, look at the humanity in Gaza. Look at the humanity with them fighting amongst. Look at any war, right? And I knew these people.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't even take it in. And I'm like, okay, like I'm like I can't with religion. Like I can't get religious. I can't get. It's We already have hell here, and religion is what causes the hell.
Yeah. Oh,
I mean, that's
that's a
the
good
problem
point.
with those two sides. Is the religious and the wars go back for thousands of years.
Wow. I appreciate that insight, and into, yeah, how that has played out for you. And do you have any? Is there anything else that you wanted to add in here?
My whole point is like, if you're raising your kids to be Christian, that's great. I think any church is good for kids as long as you don't brainwash them. It's good to give kids like good values and good morals. And like, I raised my kid in the church, and she went to Sunday school. She learned who God, like she learned about God and Jesus. Whatever religion you raise your kids in, don't teach them out of fear, because it can
Mm-hmm.
cause like crippling anxiety. And even to this day, like my anxiety is a lot better. It's not really religious trauma anymore. But even to this day, like it's always like, it's just with you. Like, and I would just encourage parents of any religion to like not be so dogmatic for your kids. I don't think there's anything wrong. Like, I believe in freedom of religion. I mean, my best friends are Hindu, and some of them are atheists, some of them are Buddhist, some of them are Christian. Like, I'm not discriminate. I don't care what religion you are, but just be careful of how you raise your kids. Like, don't like, even if you do believe in hell and everything like that, but we have hell on earth now. So like, the way I was raised to be taught that, everybody that cuts their hair or celebrates Christmas or isn't in the 2 by 2 church is going to hell. I just think that's wrong. And if you want to teach your kids Christianity, talk about the grace. Like, religion should bring freedom from fear, not fear.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't really have a message, I guess. I just think it's important that, if you are raised in 2 by 2, it might take 20 years for you to deconstruct.
Yeah. That's a really good point. We have to be kind to ourselves through that process, because it is such a process.
Yeah, like my husband, I mean, like one time I wanted to go to the Catholic Church for Easter Sunday because I like their building. They have a nice building in La Jolla. And he's like, I don't want you doing that because our daughter will be confused. And I'm like, don't you ever tell me what church I can go to. I'm like, I was raised in a cult. Like, he's not that religious. I mean, he was raised Catholic, but now he's kind of just not like Christian, whatever. But he's not
Yeah.
that religious. But I'm like, don't you ever tell me. I think we have to raise our kids with an open mind and educate them about other cultures and religions. And that's why I wanted to come on your podcast, because I've seen other podcasts and they start talking about people that are going to a lost eternity because they're not in that good Christian church anymore. And like, that's not my message. I never want to tell anybody what to believe or what not to believe, because I don't really know. I just have to do what's right for me. Right. And being judged my whole life. Like, don't tell me what to wear. Don't tell me how to dress. Don't tell me anything like about morals or anything like that. I know who I am. I know I'm a good person and I have good values. I don't need to be told how to cut my hair, not to do whatever. It's stupid. Like, don't do that to your kids. I just think it's a bad idea.
Yeah.
Like, my kid now, she has like 15 tattoos. I'm not into tattoos. I missed the boat. My generation was right. Like, we missed that by one generation. But she wants tattoos. I'm like, okay, girl, you do you. Like, whatever.
Yeah.
It's not my problem. It's not my issue to judge you.
Amen. Yeah, no, I appreciate that, man. I think people, as they listen to your whole story, are gonna understand. You may not think you had a message to share, but I think there was a message all throughout all that. So
Yeah, I mean, it was a little long-winded, but I didn't have a time to like read everything and like practice. I didn't. It was just kind of off the cuff, right? So
I think that's the way it needed to be. You have had just an amazing journey, and I really appreciate that you shared it with all of us.